Chapter 1811. Someone else is coming. When everyone heard this voice, they all looked outside the door. Why does this wedding ceremony seem to be getting more and more lively? It's already so late. Who could it be? I don't know. In the world of divine ruins, basically everyone who has dealings with the Yuntian Tower is here, right? Many people were filled with guesses. Soon, that figure came from the horizon and appeared in front of the main hall. His speed was so fast that the person in charge of passing on the message outside didn't even have time to make a sound. The main hall fell silent. Everyone's gaze fell on the person who came. It was a man who looked to be in his 40s. He was tall and sturdy, and his face was angular. At this moment, he was walking inside with a warm smile on his face. Who is this? I don't know, but looking at his imposing manner, he doesn't seem to be an ordinary person. When did such a person appear in the world of divine ruins? Yi Zhao sat up straight and stared at the person who came. Rong Xiao and Chu Luiyue stood up at the same time. Rong Xiao smiled. Senior Mao Jin, you're finally here. When the name Mao Jin was shouted out, everyone was stunned. After a moment, someone seemed to have thought of something and suddenly gasped. Mao Zhen. Could it be? Mao Zhen laughed. You also know that there have been too many things happening on the Divine Dragon Island recently, so I'm a little late. But don't worry, this old man didn't forget to bring this wedding gift. His voice was full of energy, and it echoed clearly in the entire main hall, falling into everyone's ears. When they heard Divine Dragon Island, almost everyone's expression changed. Wasn't that the great Phoenix Dragon's territory? Then, they remembered that Rong Xiao had called him Senior Mao Jin. Isn't that the great Phoenix Dragon's genius from 1,000 years ago? Mao Jin. Mao Zhen. How could it be him? Rumor has it that he's not crazy. That person didn't dare to say the rest of the words. Because Mao Jin had already heard the words and looked over. He still had a smile on his face, but when his gaze swept over, it carried a powerful pressure that made one's heart tremble. It seems that everyone is not very well informed. Mao Jin looked around and raised his eyebrows. Since everyone is here today, there are some things that I would like to tell you about. I'm Mao Jin, and I'm also the new great Phoenix Dragon's patriarch. In the future, when you meet again, please don't mistake me for someone else. Patriarch. Someone couldn't help but ask. Isn't the patriarch of the great Phoenix Dragon's patriarch? Mao Jin casually waved his hand and said with a faint smile. Mao Jin. He killed and framed his own kind, he is a sinner of the great void Phoenix Dragon race. Now, he had been stripped of his dragon scales and imprisoned. Why? Do you want to meet him? The person who asked the question instantly turned pale. No. I was just casually asking. The other people's reactions were not much better than this person's. It was like a sudden clap of thunder. Mao Zhen, who was rumored to have died a long time ago, suddenly appeared and immediately became the clan leader. On the other hand, Mao Yang, who had been the clan leader for hundreds of years, became a sinner overnight and was even sentenced to death. In fact, they couldn't be blamed for not being informed. It was really too difficult to find out about the great Phoenix Dragon's patriarch. The Divine Dragon Island's geographical location was special. Ordinary people didn't know where it was. In addition, the great Phoenix Dragon's patriarch had always been arrogant. Without some means, the human race wouldn't know anything. Most importantly, Mao Zhen was indeed busy cleaning up the patriarch's patriarch and deliberately blocked the news. Outsiders had no way of knowing. However, since he had shown up today, he naturally had to make things clear. As he spoke, he retracted his gaze and waved his sleeve. A purple gold flowing light flew out. Rong Xiao raised his hand. The purple gold flowing light landed in his palm and turned into a palm-sized dragon scale. However, these dragon scales were different from ordinary dragon scales. There was a totem drawn on the surface of the scales with bright lines. Rong Xiu's eyes flickered. Chu Luiyue also sensed the astonishing aura on the dragon scale and couldn't help but widen her eyes slightly. Senior Mao Jin, this is... this old man didn't think of what to give you previously. After all, there are many treasures in the Yuntian Tower. After thinking about it, this old man decided to give this red heart dragon scale to you. In the future, with this item, you will be my Divine Dragon Island's distinguished guests. You can come and go as you wish. If there is any danger, use this dragon scale as a signal. My great Phoenix Dragon's patriarch will spare no effort to help. At this point, he paused and looked at Chu Luiyue with admiration. This girl is really very beautiful. Rong Xiu, you are very lucky. Rong Xiu's smile deepened. The corners of his eyes and brows seemed to relax a little. Yes. It was indeed his greatest fortune to be able to marry her. Mao Jin's deep and powerful voice knocked heavily on everyone's heart. Some people were already in a daze. This is... Even the great Phoenix Dragon's patriarch came to support Sheng Wanyu. When did they know each other? They seemed to be very close. If not for their strong friendship, why would Mao Jin have such an attitude? Not only did he come to congratulate them personally, but he also gave them the red heart dragon scale. Thank you, Senior Mao Jin. Please take a seat. Chu Luiyue said with a smile. Mao Jin's seat was arranged long ago. When he sat down, he happened to sit right across from Yi Zhao. The two patriarchs of the primordial divine beasts looked at each other. In an instant, there seemed to be sparks flying everywhere. At this moment, everyone in the hall clearly felt that the air seemed to have frozen. Who didn't know that the relationship between the great Phoenix Dragon and the red gold heavenly phoenix had always been rather subtle? The two sides never casually stepped into each other's territory. There was a clear boundary between them. However, they had always been competing with each other in the open and in the dark. Now that Yi Zhao and Mao Jin met each other, there was a sense of tension. These two wouldn't fight on the spot, right? Just as everyone's hearts were filled with worry, Mao Jin was the first to laugh. Brother Yi Zhao, how have you been? His laugh broke the deadlock. Yi Zhao's face was expressionless as usual. I haven't congratulated Brother Mao Jin on clearing your grievances and returning to the peak. Mao Jin glanced at Tuan Zi and sighed with emotion. With Dumpling, Brother Yi Zhao is really enviable. These words made Yi Zhao very happy. It was useless to praise him, but as long as he praised Dumpling, his attitude would be much gentler. Not at all. I have to thank Brother Mao Jin for taking care of her previously. Mao Jin laughed. How was it me taking care of her? Dumpling has always been with her you. She has always been taking care of Dumpling. Hearing this, Yi Zhao's eyes were a little moved. He looked at Chu Luiyue and nodded gently. Thank you. Chu Luiyue hurriedly refused and smiled. You're too polite. I promised you to take good care of Dumpling. This is what I should do. The atmosphere on their side gradually became harmonious, leaving only the people in the hall with confused expressions. Why are they still reminiscing about the past? Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1812. This scene was too stimulating. Before they could even enter the Divine Phoenix Mountain, Shanghai Yu had already contracted the young master of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. Before they even knew that the clan leader of the Divine Dragon Island had changed, Shanghai Yu was already chatting happily with the new clan leader. What was even stranger was that these two clans could actually sit in the same room and chat so peacefully. Anyone with a discerning eye could see that they were giving face to Rong Xiu and Shanghai Yu. First, Yi Zhao came, which was already unbearable. Now, Maojian came too. This was simply too much. No backing. No background. Then what the F***ck is going on? Some people were already going crazy. I was just mocking Shanghai Yu. She must have heard everything. Regret. Really regret. Many people in the hall had ugly expressions on their faces. They were restless in their seats and wanted nothing more than to run away. This place. Staying for even a second longer was torture. Chu Luiyue calmly raised her wine cup, which was filled with the tea that Rong Xiao had just changed. Her thick and long eyelashes drooped slightly, hiding the surging waves in her eyes. Actually, how could there be so many rumors spreading? How could there be so many emotions being stirred up? It was simply because they themselves thought that way. These people from the aristocratic clans had been in their positions for a long time. All they could see was the small piece of land in front of them. And their views were often prejudiced. Just because she was born outside the divine ruins world, they looked down on her. No matter how outstanding she was, it still couldn't offset the obsession in the depths of their hearts. At this time, persuasion was useless. The most effective way was to give them a few slaps to wake them up. That's right. She indeed didn't have her own power in the divine ruins world. But this didn't mean that she was easy to bully. Whether it was the Yuntian Tower, Lingshao College, or the two ancient divine beast clans, they would all become her backing. From today onwards, she would let these people understand that she was not someone who would be bullied and humiliated. The banquet continued. However, for many of the people present, they had already lost their appetite. He had come here today to watch a joke, but who knew that his face would be slapped swollen in the end? However, he had to endure this slap. Whether it was the crimson gold heavenly phoenix or the great phoenix dragon, they were not people they could afford to offend. Thus, those who were happy became happier, and those who were depressed became even more depressed. Rong Xiao and Chu Luiyue didn't care about this. In any case, he had already achieved his goal. Nothing else mattered. If you truly came to congratulate them, they would welcome you with open arms. If you came here with other intentions, then you can't blame me. Suddenly, a figure rushed into the main hall. Your Highness, Princess Consort, there are two guests. Rong Xiao narrowed his eyes slightly. Those who were supposed to come today were already here. Who else would appear? Furthermore, from the looks of it, the other party's identity was somewhat unusual. Who are you? Rong Xiao asked faintly. That person hurriedly said. They said, they are from the Nan family. As these words fell, many people subconsciously stopped what they were doing, looking surprised and doubtful. The Nan family. That Nan family. Rong Xiao's expression became a little colder. Chu Luiyue raised his eyebrows slightly, put down the wine glass, and raised the corner of his lips into an ambiguous smile. It seemed that they hadn't stopped yet. Hadn't they suffered enough from before? Rong Xiao leaned back, his eyes cold. Drive them out. Digression, 11:30 p.m. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1813. That person hesitated for a moment before speaking. Your Highness, the two of them said that they're here to deliver a congratulatory gift after hearing that you're celebrating a joyous occasion today. Rong Xiao glanced at him indifferently. The silent pressure caused that person's heart to tremble, and he swallowed the rest of his words. Yes. After saying those words, that person quickly left. Many people in the ethereal hall glanced at one another. The Nan clan. Why are they here? If I recall correctly, the Yuntian Tower doesn't have much interaction with them, right? Why are they here all of a sudden? However, it seems like the Yuntian Tower doesn't welcome them. The Nan clan has always been arrogant, so what's the meaning of this? And the Yuntian Tower doesn't seem to care about them at all. The Yuntian Tower has the crimson gold celestial phoenix and the great illusionary dragon as their backing now. Who else can possibly catch their eye? You're right, in the world of God, there were many sects and clans, and the various powers were entangled with one another. It was common for the weak to rely on the strong. Without a doubt, the two primordial divine beast clans were the two thickest thighs in the world. And now, they were being embraced by the Shengguanyu alone. What else was there to say? This small interlude was quickly forgotten by everyone. Outside the barrier of the Yuntian Tower, Luo Yan's face was cold. Nan Yi stood behind him and shook his arm with an aggrieved expression. She really wanted to go in. Luo Yan turned around and patted her hand comfortingly. Then, he looked at the guard in charge of guarding the barrier. We're really here to congratulate you. The black-armored guard looked at Luo Yan coldly. His Highness' intentions are clear. The Yuntian Tower doesn't welcome you. Please leave quickly. If you continue to pester us, don't blame us for being impolite. Luo Yan's chest was burning with rage. He had never suffered such humiliation in all these years. Yet, he had been thwarted time and time again by the Rongxiu and the Shengguanyu. However, this was the other party's territory, and it wouldn't do them any good if a fight broke out. Luo Yan took a deep breath and pulled Nan Yi away. Let's go. Nan Yi wanted to struggle again, but when she looked up and saw Luo Yan's angry face, she knew that he was really angry. She didn't dare to do anything else and could only follow him obediently. The two figures quickly disappeared. About an hour later, Luo Yan brought Nan Yi to a mountain peak. The forest on the mountain was lush. The sun was shining brightly, casting mottled shadows in the forest. There seemed to be the sound of a stream flowing in his ears. Everything was calm and peaceful. However, Nan Yi's mood wasn't soothed by this scenery. Along the way, she followed behind Luo Yan with her head lowered silently. Luo Yan only stopped when he reached a relatively flat area. As soon as he turned around, Nan Yi looked up and only then did he see the tears on her face. Luo Yan's heart instantly felt as if it had been pricked by something, and his voice softened a lot. I've already said that this method won't work. We've already made such a fuss with them before, so why would they still be in contact with us? Besides, today is their wedding day. If it were him, he would definitely make the same choice. Nan Yi had always been very smart. He didn't know why she was so persistent this time. She knew that there was a wall in front of her, but she still wanted to hit it hard. Nan Yi pursed her lips as tears kept falling. Ever since she couldn't speak, she didn't want to make any sound, including crying. It would only make her feel tormented and painful. Luo Yan patted her shoulder gently and sighed. I know you hate him. But you haven't recovered from your injuries yet. Even if you want to take revenge, you don't have the ability to do so, right? And, for some reason, the family head is obviously very afraid of Rongxiu. If we act rashly, I'm afraid that the Nan family will also. Nan Yi turned her head away. She didn't want to care about this. She only knew that her tongue had been cut off and she couldn't speak anymore. No one else could understand her pain, so how could they be in a position to comfort her? Seeing her like this, Luo Yan knew that it was useless to persuade her, so he didn't say anything. He had already brought her here according to her request, but he couldn't do anything more. She still needed to slowly digest this kind of thing herself. Nan Yi suddenly walked towards the middle of the mountain. Luo Yan frowned and immediately followed. Where are you going? Nan Yi didn't stop and just walked forward. Luo Yan wanted to stop her, but seeing that she still seemed to be angry, he knew that the only thing he could do now was to go along with her, so he could only follow her. The two of them walked forward in silence. About a quarter of an hour later, a black shadow suddenly flew past. A dangerous and cold aura was approaching rapidly. Luo Yan knew that something was wrong and immediately pulled Nan Yi back. Step back. But it was already too late. The black shadow approached quickly and turned into a black fog that swallowed Nan Yi. Luo Yan was shocked and immediately mobilized the force in his body to take action. However, at this moment, he was shocked to discover that his body seemed to be fixed by something and he couldn't move. Then, the black fog quickly spread over and strangled Luo Yan's neck. It was like a venomous snake slowly crawling around his neck, cold and sinister. Luo Yan desperately mobilized the force in his body, but he was still helpless. One had to know that he was a venerable god expert, and ordinary cultivators were no match for him. Even if a venerable god of the same level fought against him, it was impossible for him to be crushed like this. Just as countless thoughts flashed through Luo Yan's mind, the black fog had already started to spread around him and swallow him bit by bit. Perhaps because he was much stronger than Nan Yi, the speed at which the black fog swallowed him was obviously much slower. But this couldn't go on. If he couldn't think of a way to escape, he was afraid that, boom, a powerful force suddenly erupted from Luo Yan's body. The violent force spread out in all directions, causing the black fog to disperse. Luo Yan was finally able to catch his breath. He immediately turned around and fled without hesitation. He used the fastest speed in his life. However, the black fog wasn't slow either. Before he could run far, Luo Yan felt a strong force pulling his ankle. He looked down, and his heart skipped a beat. The black fog had already wrapped around him again. This time, the power contained in the black fog seemed to have become stronger, causing Luo Yan's speed to become slower and slower. A strong sense of fear struck him. Luo Yan suddenly turned around. The black fog was like a monster that opened its bloody mouth and swallowed him. A strange blood-colored totem suddenly flashed in front of his eyes. Then, Luo Yan's vision turned black and he lost consciousness. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Even if he forcefully recovers his Yuan Meridian, he will only be able to recover 30% of his original talent. You don't have to spend so much effort. Nan Yifan instantly felt like he had fallen into an ice cave. How can it only recover 30%? Lord Sect Leader's divine abilities. If it was an ordinary person, it wouldn't be a problem. But the key point is, the one who did it this time was Rong Xiu. He wanted your son to suffer a fate worse than death, so he used some special means. Even if it was me, it would take a lot of effort to completely deal with him. Nan Yifan's eyes lit up as if he had grasped onto the last straw. Lord Sect Leader still has a way. But before he could continue, the other party continued. But why don't you think about it? Nan Yuxing is worthy of me using my full strength. Nan Yifan's heart turned cold. Using my full strength, not to mention Nan Yuxing, even he was not worthy. But, if that was the case, wouldn't Nan Yuxing be finished? Nan Yuxing was bent on seeking death. Even if he recovered 30% of his talent, he would not be able to accept it. How could a prideful person like him accept becoming a cripple? He could not even accept becoming an ordinary person. These two situations were equally painful for people like him. So, it still doesn't work. Nan Yifan's expression was dejected and defeated. He had already abandoned all his dignity and pride to come here and ask for help. But, it still didn't work. When he thought of the scene of Nan Yuxing begging him to help, his heart couldn't help but tremble. In this world, there was probably no parent who could accept this. Rong Xiu, even I won't easily make a move against him. Your good son and daughter are very bold. How dare they provoke him again and again? They are really courting death. There was a hint of mockery in the voice. they can only blame themselves for this. Nan Yifan's face was pale and his cracked lips trembled violently. Of course, he knew all this. But, how could he have thought that Nan Yuxing and Yi would encounter Rong Xiao in the god-slaying tomb? Furthermore, for various reasons, he had even gotten into a fight with them. Even though he had tried his best to make up for it after he found out about this, it was obviously useless. Is there really no other way? Nan Yifan murmured in despair. Actually, it's not that there is no other way. It just depends on whether you are willing to do it or not. The voice said slowly. Nan Yifan suddenly raised his head. Please give me some pointers, sect leader. The other party seemed to smile again, but he did not directly answer the question. Instead, he changed the topic and asked him a question. If I remember correctly, your daughter's talent seems to be pretty good. Nan Yifan nodded in a daze. Yes. Yi's talent is also very outstanding. Chapter 1815. These words were like an extremely sharp knife that ruthlessly pierced through Nan Yifan's last cover. He peeled off his skin and flesh, revealing his bloody insides. His body swayed, but his face turned even paler. However, even he had to admit that the other party was right. All these years, on the surface, he seemed to dote on Nan Yi more, but in reality, he had always placed his hopes of inheriting the heavy responsibility on Nan Yuxing. If Nan Yuxing died, all his hard work over the past few decades would be in vain. So now, he finally made this extremely difficult decision. Nan Yifan fell to the ground. All his strength seemed to have been sucked out by someone, and his entire body was shrouded in a layer of despair. You made a wise decision. The other party praised him. Nan Yifan gasped for breath and said weakly, That's right. I want to go back first and talk to Yi. Why go through so much trouble? The other party interrupted him. I know you're a smart person, so I've already brought Nan Yi over. Nan Yifan suddenly looked up. A gust of wind blew past, and the reeds swayed. In the depths of the black swamp, a black fog wrapped around a person and flew over. Nan Yifan recognized at a glance that the person inside was his daughter, Nan Yi. Sect Master. This. After the shock, Nan Yifan couldn't help but feel a strong anger in his heart. Had he already set his sights on Yi? Don't be in a hurry to be angry. Your precious daughter has a lot of thoughts. When I found her, she wasn't in the Nan family, but on a mountain peak not far from the Yuntian Tower. At this time, she still thinks that she can rely on her own ability to take revenge. Nan Yifan pursed his lips tightly and didn't say anything. This was indeed something that Nan Yi would do. In the past, when she was a little arrogant and willful, he would at most criticize her a little and had never really taken it seriously. It was probably because of this that he raised her to be so naive and even to the point of stupidity. He looked at Nan Yi, who was trapped in the black fog. At this moment, her eyes were tightly shut, and she seemed to be still unconscious. As if she had sensed something, Nan Yi frowned. Her eyelashes fluttered slightly. He was about to wake up. Do you still want to talk to her? The voice asked. Nan Yifan clenched his fists so tightly that his bones creaked. Finally, he let go of his hand. No need. These two words seemed to have used up all of his strength. In the next second, the black fog quickly entered Nan Yi's body. Chi! In an instant, blood splattered everywhere. Nan Yifan's vision turned black, and he fainted. Yuntian Tower. That small setback did not attract the attention of the crowd. The appearance of Yi Zhao and Mao Jin caused a huge change in the atmosphere in the ethereal hall. Most people became a little more reserved. He had never cared much about such trivial matters. 13 took a bite of the snack and couldn't help but lean closer. Big brother, when do you plan to tell Master about that matter? Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 18:16. Tsuni glanced at him. Eat your food properly. 13 shrunk his neck and said obediently. Oh. Looks like Big Brother doesn't intend to save for the time being. However, Big Brother has always been a strategist, so he definitely has his own plans. It's not my place to worry. 13's gaze landed on the wine glass beside him. Inside, there was clear wine that glowed with light. He licked his lips, his eyes filled with curiosity. Big Brother, can I drink? Tsuni didn't turn around. No. 13 had expected this outcome, but he still hesitated and struggled. Then, just one mouthful. Tsuni glanced at him. If you beat me, I'll let you drink. 13 was instantly discouraged. Big Brother said that every time. In the past, he didn't have any experience. Every time he felt that he had improved, he would think that he could win and excitedly run to compete with Big Brother. Then, he would return in defeat. Without exception. If he wanted to beat Big Brother, God knows how long it would take. Seeing his dejected expression, Shifang couldn't bear to see him like this. Big Brother, 13 is still a child. It's fine to let him drink just one mouthful. There are so many of us here. Little Hachi's beautiful eyes flickered as she gave Shifang a thumbs up. A true warrior. Not only did he dare to suggest to Big Brother, but he also dared to suggest letting 13 drink. Shifang's heart skipped a beat when she looked at him like this. Only then did he recall some tragic past and hurriedly try to salvage the situation. No. What I mean is, if Big Brother thinks it's inappropriate, then forget it. Forget it. 13, if you really want to drink, how about I make rice wine for you? 13 revealed a rare speechless expression. Little Hachi rolled her eyes again. Weiyao finally stopped eating. Yujiu poked him. 13 is confused. Is Shifang also confused? Could it be that Shifang had become stupid from farming? How could he say that? Weiyao swallowed the last mouthful of meat and sighed. This rice is really delicious. Unfortunately, he couldn't eat it today. Shifang. Tsuni suddenly spoke. Shifang shuddered all over. Hey, Big Brother. You are not allowed to eat for a month. Shifang's face instantly collapsed. No, Big Brother, I really didn't mean that. Just listen casually, don't take it to heart. The vegetables I grew over there will be ready to eat in a few days. After all, he had been starving for a long time. How was he going to survive if this continued for another month? However, Tsuni did not care whether he lived or died. 13 revealed a guilty expression. 10th brother, I'm sorry, if it weren't for him, brother 10 wouldn't have been punished like this. For a moment, 13 felt wronged and guilty. He just wanted to give it a try. Master doesn't like you drinking. Tsuni suddenly said calmly. 13 was stunned. He raised his head to look at him in surprise. Really? He had never heard his master mention it before. Tsuni frowned. The last time you accidentally drank wine, master was worried for a few days. Tsuni's face immediately turned red. Although it had been a few years and he couldn't really remember what had happened at that time, it would be better if he didn't make his master worry. Big Brother, I was wrong. 13 lowered his head and obediently admitted his mistake. Tsuni nodded in satisfaction. This matter was finally over. The rest of them looked at each other. TSK, little 13 was too pitiful. Master didn't even know that he drank, let alone whether he liked it or not. In terms of scheming, who could be Big Brother's match? Poor Eva. Tsuni looked up at Chu Luyue, who was sitting at the head of the table. Digression: this is the last update on the 11th. It will be updated at noon on the 12th. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from AI Network. Chapter 18:17. She was dressed in a red wedding gown with a phoenix coronet on her head. Her features were as beautiful as a painting, and her skin was as fair as jade. All the light in the surroundings seemed to fall on her body. She was magnificent, nothing more than that. Sunny smiled and retracted his gaze. The wedding banquet lasted for a very long time. Yi Zhao and Mao Zhen stayed for a while longer before taking their leave. They rarely interacted with humans, and it was already a rare occasion that they were willing to pay a visit to Rongxiu and Sheng Wanyu. Yi Zhao didn't like such a lively scene, but seeing that Dumpling was fine, he was relieved. In the end, he bade elder Yi Yu farewell. Mao Zhen was in a better state. After being trapped in the coiling dragon pillar for 1,000 years, he had been very lonely. On top of that, he had been busy dealing with the problems that Mao Yang had left behind on Divine Dragon Island. It was rare for him to have some free time, so he decided to stay here for a while longer. It was only in the afternoon that he finally left. After the two of them left, the atmosphere in the ethereal hall finally returned to normal. Many people heaved a sigh of relief, but they couldn't help but feel a little regretful. It was rare for them to meet the two of them, but they didn't even get a chance to speak to them, let alone build a relationship with them. Obviously, they were here to support the two people who were getting married today. Faced with such a situation, what else could they do other than feel envious? Eventually, the crowd bade their farewells one after another, and it was only in the evening that all of the guests finally left. At night, there was a grand display of fireworks. Everyone gathered at the square in front of the ethereal hall. In the dark night sky, countless brilliant fireworks bloomed one after another. The entire Yuntian Tower was ablaze with lights, and it was immersed in a lively atmosphere. Chu Luiyue raised her head to look at this scene. Rongxiu turned to look at her. The fireworks illuminated her face, making it seem as clear as jade. It made her eyes seem as if they were filled with a myriad of stars. He held her hand tightly, and their fingers intertwined. Yue, what are you thinking about? Chu Luiyue turned to look at him. I'm thinking about you. Her red lips curled into a smile as her eyes curved into crescents. Husband, I'm thinking about you. Rongxiu's heartbeat stopped for a moment. There were no words more touching than this one sentence from her. A moment later, his eyes flashed and he moved closer. What did you say? Chu Luiyue raised her eyebrows but refused to say anything. She just looked at him with a smile. Rongxiu gently rubbed her hand with his slightly rough fingers and coaxed her. Say it again. This husband didn't hear it clearly. Chu Luiyue's smile deepened. He didn't hear her clearly and even said, husband. Seeing that she was unwilling, Rongxiu's eyes deepened. After that, a wisp of a smile that carried deep meaning appeared on his handsome and devilish face. He took her hand and turned to leave. Yan Qing, who was standing at the side, saw this and immediately stepped forward. Your Highness. Rongxiu raised his eyebrows and said calmly, I'm drunk, so I'm going back to rest. Chu Luiyue's face turned red. He didn't look drunk at all. Yes, Rongxiu had drunk a lot before, but just now he was talking to her with clear eyes. In the blink of an eye, he said that he was drunk. Who would believe that? Yan Qing wanted to ask more, but Yuemo pulled him from behind. He looked back and saw Yuemo frantically winking at him. What are you doing? Can't you tell? Yan Qing immediately came back to his senses. A rare trace of embarrassment appeared on his iceberg-like face. He had really forgotten about it. A woman's laughter suddenly came from the side. It turns out that Lord Yan Qing also has times when his brain doesn't work. Yan Qing looked back and saw that it was a woman in a colorful dress who spoke. He remembered that this woman was one of the princess's subordinates. Hearing the other party's ridicule, he didn't take it seriously and quickly withdrew his gaze. He returned to his iceberg face. Little Hachi snorted coldly in her heart. She simply walked forward and waved her hand in front of his eyes. "I'm talking to you." When she approached, a fragrant wind blew. Her jade-like arms swayed in front of his eyes, and the colorful strings and bells on her slender wrists jingled. Yan Qing frowned and took half a step back. "Miss Little Hachi, the mountain wind is cold at night. Remember to wear more clothes." Little Hachi was angered to death by his words. Was he mocking her clothes? She had always dressed like this and looked beautiful. What's wrong with that? Ordinary men would have their eyes glued to her when they saw her like this. Not many of them would not be captivated by her. This Yan Qing was different. Not only did he ignore her problem, but he also ignored her as a person. "I'm fine. You don't have to care." When Little Hachi was angry, she was still very beautiful and enchanting. Even if she glared, she still looked somewhat seductive. So this gaze was not lethal to Yan Qing at all. He nodded. "In that case, Yan Qing will take his leave first. Little Hachi, have fun." With that, he really turned and left. Little Hachi was left alone in the wind, confused. "Sister 8, this is the first time a man has pulled a long face at you, right?" Shi Fang came over and glanced at Yan Qing from afar with eyes full of admiration. As expected of His Highness the Holy Sun's confidant. "You're clear-minded and have strong self-control." Sigh, Sister 8, bang. Lil 8 elbowed Shi Fang's face with the back of his hand. Shi Fang let out a muffled groan, almost dying here. "No one will treat you as a mute if you don't speak." Chapter 18:18. Chu Liuyue's heart suddenly jumped along with the candlelight. The sound of footsteps approached from behind, as if stepping on her heart. Until a pair of arms wrapped around her waist from behind. Rong Xiao held her in his arms, gently rested his chin on her shoulder, and sighed. They could smell each other's breaths. There was indeed an intoxicating smell of alcohol on his body. Mixed with the faint cold fragrance, it seemed to create an irresistible fatal attraction. Chu Liyue suddenly felt relieved. She reached out and overlapped Rong Xiao's hand. "You, Rong Xiao's voice was deep and pleasant, and a little hoarse. "You are mine." Gentle, firm, and domineering. Chu Liyue's heart seemed to be filled with something. She smiled gently and said, "Yes. I am yours, and you are mine." They had each other, and they belonged to each other. "I have waited for this day for a long time, Rong Xiao said in a low voice. He spoke very slowly, as if he was really drunk, but also as if he was thinking about something, filled with longing for something from a long time ago. Chu Liyue's heart suddenly softened. "You say it again." Rong Xiao was almost whispering in her ear. Therefore, every syllable, every breath, fell clearly into her ears and her heart. His hot breath fell on her ears and neck, and it was slightly itchy. She couldn't help but laugh and shrink her neck. Husband. Anyway, from now on, there will be plenty of opportunities to say it. You. Rong Xiao suddenly bit her delicate earlobe. The tip of his tongue rolled gently, and it was boiling hot. Her voice suddenly stopped and turned into a soft murmur. Rong Xiao hugged her tighter, and his voice was hoarse. The vague syllables scattered sporadically. But today I really want to hear it. It was a sleepless night. Lingxiao College. It was already late at night, and a bright moon hung high in the sky. It flowed quietly like water. In the room, a person stood alone by the window. The moonlight elongated his shadow. I stood alone. His face was hidden behind the shadow of the carved window and could not be seen clearly. In the depths of his eyes, there was a thick coldness that could not be dissolved. Suddenly, the space behind him began to ripple. Then, a figure appeared in the room. It was Iwenswa. Damn it! Iwenswa could not help but curse as soon as he came out of the void. The indifference on Jun Juqing's face quickly faded. He raised his eyebrows slightly and turned to salute. Master, you're back. That devilish and flirtatious face had already returned to its usual expression. Iwenswa did not notice this. He slammed the table angrily. This pair of master and disciple are really cunning. Earlier, when he noticed that Nan Su Huai had left, he secretly followed him. But not long after, Nan Su Huai seemed to have noticed his presence and used some tricks to shake him off. After that, he searched for a long time but could not find Nan Su Huai. In the end, he heard that Rong Xiao and Sheng Wanyu were getting married. As the master, Nan Su Huai personally went to congratulate them. What was more hateful was that the clan leaders of the Crimson Gold Celestial Phoenix and Great Phoenix Dragon were also there. From now on, the entire Divine Ruins world would know that they had these two great backers. It would be even more difficult to deal with them. That Sheng Wanyu, I don't know what tricks she used. Not only did she make Yi Zhao agree to continue the contract with the Crimson Gold Celestial Phoenix, but she also made Yi Zhao choose her as the young master. Iwenswa knew very well that the Crimson Gold Celestial Phoenix had broken through from the Crimson Tail Phoenix, so the position of young master must have been added later. What were Yi Zhao and the elders of the Crimson Gold Celestial Phoenix clan thinking? Why would they choose a Crimson Gold Celestial Phoenix who had already contracted with a human to be the young master of their clan? Jun Juqing said indifferently. Her luck has always been good. Iwenswa still could not accept this. With this relationship between Sheng Wanyu and Yi Zhao, it would be even more difficult for them to do anything in the future. Do you know that Nan Su Huai personally gave out 2 green jade tokens at their wedding? He even said that she's his only disciple. Iwenswa gritted his teeth. He's obviously passing the position of dean to her. Jun Juqing was silent for a moment. In fact, they should have realized this earlier. Back then, Nan Su Huai did not hide his admiration and adoration for Chu Luiyue. Now that she had returned, her talent and strength were even greater than before. Naturally, Nan Su Huai valued her even more. Not to mention, she now had several backers. Not to mention Iwenswa, even the major families and clans of the Yuntian Tower would not dare to do anything to her in the future. The room fell into silence. Iwenswa took a few deep breaths and tried to calm himself down. Then, he suddenly thought of something and looked up at Jun Juqing. There was a hint of curiosity in his eyes. You know that they're getting married today, right? Jun Juqing nodded and seemed to chuckle. The Yuntian Tower sent out invitations. Other than those who had completely fallen out with them, the rest of the Yuntian Tower's influential figures were all invited. Who doesn't know about this now? Iwenswa looked at him suspiciously. You don't have any thoughts? Although he had always told Jun Juqing not to fall in love with that girl, he was still his disciple after all. He could guess what was on his mind. Jun Juqing raised an eyebrow. This disciple does not dare to forget master's teachings. Besides, since they're already married, there's nothing to say. Iwenswa stared at him for a long time before nodding in relief. It's good that you can think like that. There are many women in the world. Juqing, as long as you can get to the top, what kind of woman can't you want? Jun Juqing smiled and lowered his eyes, hiding the emotions in his eyes. Iwenswa asked again. I see that your aura seems to have strengthened a lot. Did you break through again? Jun Juqing nodded. Iwenswa knocked on the table. That's good. Anyway, there's no need to continue staying in the academy. We'll go back tomorrow. What belongs to you, you still have to take it back. A dark light flashed in Jun Joqing's eyes as he responded. Yes. Sacrificial God Temple. It was still morning. White mountain mist surged back and forth, making the entire sacrificial God Temple seem like an illusion. Among them, a strong and agile huge white figure jumped a few times and headed toward the sacrificial God Temple. It was Xue Xue. It went to the window as usual, but found that the window was locked and there was a layer of enchantment. It couldn't enter at all. Xue Xue's face instantly collapsed, and it could only lie down under the window. It clenched its claws in boredom while waiting for the person inside to come out. In the room, under the red brocade quilt, 3,000 strands of black hair were spread out messily. Chu Luiyue opened her eyes in a daze. Who? Her voice was very hoarse, and because she was still sleepy, it was especially soft. Rong Xiao kissed her forehead and coaxed in a low voice, no one. You didn't sleep well last night, so you should make up for it first. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 18-19. Chu Luiyue wanted to beat up the culprit, but her body was sore and weak. She mumbled a few words and quickly fell asleep again. After coaxing her to sleep, Rong Xiao got up. He was casually wearing a snow-white inner shirt. It was loose and revealed a large portion of his marble-like chest. He clearly hadn't slept the whole night, but he was very energetic. There was even a hint of exuberance in his noble eyes. Clearly, the saint was in a good mood. He took a step and quickly walked to the window. Sensing his arrival, Xue Xue immediately got up happily. Was he going to open the door? Was he going to let it in? Rong Xiao's cold voice sounded. Looks like you're very free. Then make a trip to the Red Moon Desert. Xue Xue immediately felt as if it was struck by lightning. Red Moon Desert. Go again. No. It pounced on the wall and let out a low roar, hoping to awaken its master's last bit of conscience. Finally, Rong Xiao's voice sounded again. Double. Roar. Xue Xue widened its eyes in horror, then turned and ran. No double, no double. I'll go right now, okay? Xue Xue, who was in a panic, drew a white line in the air and then quickly disappeared. In the distance, Umo poked Yan Qing. TSK. Did you see that? If you had followed them yesterday, you would have ended up like them. Yan Qing's expression didn't change. Yes. When Chu Luiyue woke up again, it was already noon. Just as she moved, Rong Xiao walked over. You're up. Chu Luiyue nodded and stretched out her hand from under the blanket. Her jade-like slender arms were especially eye-catching under the red brocade quilt. Rong Xiao's eyes darkened, but he restrained himself and took a new set of clothes from the side. He bent down slightly, carefully and gently picked her up from the bed, and helped her put on her clothes. Even though her black hair hung down and covered most of her skin, a few red marks could still be faintly seen. Chu Luiyue's face was slightly red. She wanted to wear it herself, but she was half-hugged in someone's arms. She was sleepy and tired, so after struggling for a while, she gave up. She let him serve her from head to toe. After putting on her clothes, Rong Xiao poured another cup of tea and brought it to her mouth. Moisten my throat. Yesterday was really tiring for her. Chu Luiyue was half leaning against the headboard. Hearing this, her eyebrows twitched and she couldn't help but look up at him. These words, why did it feel so wrong? After taking a closer look, she began to feel indignant. Why was Rong Xiao so energetic when she was tormented half to death? Open your mouth. Rong Xiao seemed to know what she was thinking. He raised his eyebrows and pushed the teacup forward. White steam rose in spirals, enshrouding his noble and unparalleled eyes. Chu Luiyue was really thirsty, so she took his hand and took small sips. The temperature of the tea was just right. It was warm and moistened her throat. Chu Luiyue instantly felt much better. Good girl. Rong Xiao put the teacup back and asked. Do you still want to sleep? Chu Luiyue shook her head. She glanced outside. You've already slept until now. It was rare for her to feel embarrassed. Rong Xiao smiled and comforted her. Don't worry, there's no one in Yuntian Tower who needs you to bow to early in the morning. From now on, you're the princess consort, and naturally the most honorable. Logically speaking, after the wedding, they were supposed to visit the clan leader together. However, the clan leader had been in a coma and hadn't woken up yet, so this process was naturally skipped. Chu Luiyue then felt more at ease. Rong Xiao looked at her and couldn't help but kiss her lips. However, his movements were very restrained. He only skimmed the surface of the water and didn't go any further. Do you want to go out for a walk? Hearing his suggestion, Chu Luiyue was surprised for a moment. However, on second thought, she didn't seem to have taken a closer look at the Yuntian Tower before. Most of the time, she stayed at Duming Peak. She nodded. Okay. Changyi Mountain. Sun Yi was reading. Wu Yao was still practicing boxing. Little Hachi was thinking about how to teach Yan Qing a lesson. Yu Jiu was still practicing his sword. Shi Fang was watering the vegetable garden. 13 ran away early in the morning and was nowhere to be seen. Crack. A crisp cracking sound was heard. Yu Jiu looked at the wooden sword in his hand gloomily. This was already the second sword he had used in the past month. He looked at Sun Yi. Big brother, can I change to another sword? This wooden sword is too boring. Sun Yi didn't even raise his head. No. As he spoke, he waved his sleeve and something flew out. Chi! Yu Jiu hurriedly caught it. Only then did he realize that it was another wooden sword. However, this wooden sword seemed to be tougher than the previous one. Yu Jiu looked at it for a while and finally couldn't help but ask. Big brother, how many wooden swords did you prepare? Sun Yi flipped a page. It's enough for you. Fine. There was no end to this. Yu Jiu resigned himself to fate and started again. Little Hachi suddenly stood up and hurriedly walked out. Shi Fang looked up and asked. Sister 8, where are you going? Little Hachi glanced at him. Shi Fang immediately felt a faint pain in his nose and hurriedly said, Farewell, Sister 8. I wish Sister 8 a triumphant return. Little Hachi curled her lips into a smile and walked away seductively. After Wu Yao finished practicing, he wiped the sweat off his face. Big brother, about what 13 asked yesterday. Have you already made a decision? Sun Yi looked up. Wu Yao coughed. What I mean is. It doesn't seem good to delay any longer. Sun Yi nodded and put away the book. I'll go look for Master. You guys stay here. After saying that, he lifted his foot and walked outside. Compared to the other first-rate families, they were not inferior in any way. Rong Xiao spoke of such a shocking achievement in such a relaxed manner, and even disdained it. It was really, no wonder the people of the Black Demon Cave hated both of them now. This could be considered a deep hatred, and no one would easily let it go. But, a few years ago, I remember that you were only an exalted god at that time. How did you win? Chu Luiyue was even more puzzled about this point. To be precise, she never knew Rong Xiao's true strength. He seemed to be, always able to erupt with combat power that was higher than his own realm. Rong Xiao's expression changed slightly, and he raised his eyebrows and smiled. Actually, it was a coincidence. When I went, they seemed to be busy preparing something. Whether it was Mo Shiqian or his subordinates, their strength was limited to a certain extent, and they couldn't fully exert it. So. He paused. You should have heard that the cultivation method they cultivate is very strange. Although it can quickly improve one's realm and strength, it often brings about a lot of problems. Chu Luiyue nodded in understanding. She had indeed heard about this long ago. It was also because of this that the Black Demon Cave had always been disliked by many families and clans in the world of divine ruins. They thought that their cultivation method was evil and went against the heavens. However, there were countless cultivators in this world who wanted to take shortcuts. So over the years, there had been a continuous stream of people joining the Black Demon Cave. This also caused their forces to always be very stable and difficult to be destroyed easily. In addition, in these years, the Black Demon Cave had taken the initiative to hide from the world, and everything was peaceful, so everyone gradually ignored them. But for Chu Luiyue, she always had to be vigilant. The Black Demon Cave wanted her Guqin score. They had done so in the past, and now, their desire was probably even stronger. According to Senior Ah Jing, his Guqin score had been divided into 3 parts, and now she had 2 of them. Only the last part was missing to complete it. Of course, the people of the Black Demon Cave would not give up. Do you know where they are now? Chu Luiyue asked. For some reason, she felt that Rongxiu should know something. I can only roughly determine their location. As for their specific location, I really don't know. Rongxiu spread his hands and smiled frankly. However, there is one person who is close to them. If he can personally go, it won't be difficult to find them. Who? Chu Luiyue was rather curious. Rongxiu looked at her steadily. Senior Diwu. Senior Diwu was, of course, Diwu Zhangze. Chu Luiyue was very surprised. She had thought of many possibilities, but this was the only one she had not expected. How could it be? Senior Diwu and the others have been trapped in the Red Moon Desert. Other than Debao, he and Senior Lan Shao can't even leave the Great Desolate Swamp. How could? And the reason why Debao could leave was because he had reconstructed his divine body. Rongxiu paused for a moment and said, Senior Diwu is indeed related to the Black Demon Cave. Chu Luiyue was stunned for a while. She had indeed never heard them mention this before, Master. At this moment, a familiar voice sounded. Chu Luiyue turned around. Cini, why are you here? Cini cupped his hands and bowed to the 2 of them. Then, he said, this subordinate has something to report to you. Chu Luiyue was a little puzzled. At this time, what did Cini want to say to her? If it was something important, he would have said it earlier. If it wasn't important, he wouldn't have come to report it at all. Rongxiu smiled. Then you guys chat first. I'll go see the chief. He had always been absolutely respectful to Chu Luiyue. Cin Yi was her subordinate. Even if they were in the Yuntian Tower, he would not interfere with her matters. Chu Luiyue's heart warmed as she nodded. Rongxiu moved and quickly left. Only Chu Luiyue and Cin Yi were left here. Chu Luiyue went straight to the point. Cin Yi, what happened? Cin Yi's expression was calm as an extremely faint light flashed across his narrow and indifferent eyes. Master, Sanson sent a message back some time ago saying that he wants to invite you back to Peach Blossom Cove. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1821. The Peach Blossom Cove was the place where Chu Luiyue had first met Rongxiu. It was an extremely special place. Even though it was part of the Divine Ruins world, the power of the Gate Realm was weak and the space was unstable. It would be destroyed by the spatial turbulence from time to time, and if one was not careful, they would lose their lives. It was extremely dangerous. Hence, there was no aristocratic family guarding that place. After all, it was more important to protect one's own life first. If one had to face the danger of death at all times and could not obtain any benefits, what was the point of going there? The Peach Blossom Cove was such a place. There were no heavenly treasures or earthly treasures there, nor were there any exceptional opportunities. There were only undulating mountain ranges and large patches of peach blossom forests. For some reason, the peach blossoms in the Peach Blossom Cove did not bloom or wither according to the season. Furthermore, they bloomed for a long time, and sometimes, they would bloom for several years. Because of this, the world gave it a beautiful name, Peach Blossom Cove. However, the Peach Blossom Cove was not deserted. On the contrary, there were always many people there. This was because many people who came from outside the Divine Ruins world would choose to go to the Peach Blossom Cove when they had no other way to pass through the Gate Realm. Compared to other places, the Peach Blossom Cove had almost no barriers and was very easy to enter. Of course, if one made this decision, it did not mean that cultivators would be able to enter the Divine Ruins world smoothly. The Peach Blossom Cove was filled with danger. Of those who entered the Peach Blossom Cove, there was only a 1% chance of successfully walking out and officially becoming a person of the Divine Ruins world. However, even so, there were still waves of people who tried to enter. Furthermore, to the people of the Divine Ruins world, the Peach Blossom Cove was an absolute zone that no one was in charge of. It was very suitable for those who had nowhere else to go. There was abundant heaven and earth energy there, and logically speaking, it was very suitable for cultivation. However, because the space was unstable and no one was able to find a solution to this problem, the Peach Blossom Cove was gradually abandoned. In the Divine Ruins world, all the aristocratic families and clans that were able to develop needed a stable and powerful place to cultivate. The Peach Blossom Cove obviously did not meet this requirement. In short, the Peach Blossom Cove was very chaotic and dangerous. It was definitely a place where crooks mixed in with the honest folk. After Chu Luiyue and Rong Xiao left that place, they had never returned. Why did Sanson go there? Chu Luiyue was extremely shocked. Why didn't you mention this before? Cini chuckled. This is his own choice. I advised him once. The general meaning was that Peach Blossom Cove was too far away from Yuntian Tower, and he really couldn't get there in such a short period of time. In addition, the shop's business hasn't been very good recently, and he didn't earn much this month. He felt very guilty and planned to work harder during this period of time to make more profits. Finally, he invited her to go over and inspect it to show his determination to work hard. Looking at the last few sentences, Chu Luiyue's eyelids twitched violently. This was still considered little, this was still considered as business not doing very well. What had Sanson experienced in the past few years in Peach Blossom Cove? Sanson said that since you've already decided to stay in the Divine Ruins world, you should buy some properties. He has already picked a few places and asked you to choose. Of course, if you fancy anything else, it's up to you. Cini lowered his head slightly with a respectful attitude. Chu Luiyue held her forehead and did not speak for a long time. She had to slow down. The feeling of being hit by money made her feel a little dizzy. Digression, I really have a cold, so I'm writing slowly. But I'll continue to update today until 10 p.m. So it's better for everyone to read it together later. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. However, even now, he still didn't have the upper hand against those aristocratic families and clans. T.S. T. Cini stood with his hands by his side, quietly waiting. After a while, Chu Luiyue put the letter away. Inform the 13 USEC to head to Peach Blossom Cove together in 3 days. When Chu Luiyue returned to the sacrificial god temple, Rong Xiao was already waiting in the room. It was already evening, and the light of the setting sun poured in through the window. Rong Xiao was reclining on a rattan chair, holding a book in his hand. The warm orange light fell on his snow-white brocade robes, shining brilliantly. Hearing footsteps, he looked up and his thin lips curled. "You're back." Chu Luiyue leaned on the door frame and looked at him. Suddenly, a strange feeling arose in her heart. She had never felt this way before. When she stepped over the threshold, someone was already waiting in the room. When they saw her, they would smile and say, "You're back." It was as if the wind, rain, thunder, and snow outside were easily blocked by this sentence. For the first time, she realized that she was married to Rong Xiao. From now on, they had one thing in common: home. Seeing that she didn't move, Rong Xiao put down the book in his hand and walked over. "What's wrong? What are you thinking about that made you so lost in thought?" Chu Luiyue shook her head and walked over to hold his hand, smiling slightly. "I was thinking that it would have been better if I had married you earlier." Rong Xiao raised his eyebrows, obviously pleased by this sentence. "How's the chief?" Chu Luiyue asked as she walked in. "Still the same. He has no intention of waking up, and has been relying on pills to prolong his life." Rong Xiao's tone was calm. This was also within his expectations. Chu Luiyue nodded. Rong Xiao and Bailey Jun didn't have a good relationship, so there was no need for him to care too much. Besides, judging from the things that happened to Bailey Jun before, his coma might not be a bad thing. Sometimes, living with a clear mind was a very painful thing. Chu Luiyue walked to the rattan chair and sat down. This rattan chair was very wide, and there was no problem for it to accommodate two people. Rong Xiao took the opportunity to lie down next to her. The two of them stayed together in silence. There was no need for them to speak, but they could already feel each other's feelings. Chu Luiyue snuggled into his arms and then looked up at him. "Rong Xiao, I want to go to Peach Blossom Dock in a few days." Rong Xiao pushed the strands of hair in front of her forehead away and kissed her brows. "Oh. Why do you suddenly think of this?" Chu Luiyue told him about Sansan and her plans. Although the situation in Peach Blossom Dock is complicated, since Sansan wrote a letter, she should be somewhat prepared. Chapter 1823. 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. Everyone was surprised to learn that Rong Xiao and Chu Luiyue were planning to leave Yuntian Tower and head to Peach Blossom Cove. Rong Xiao only said that Yuntian Tower was the place where they pledged their love to each other. Now that they were getting married, they wanted to go back and take a look. This explanation made sense, so no one continued to pursue the matter. However, why is Yan Qing going too? Crack. Little Hachi broke the hairpin in her hand with a murderous look. Yujio silently put away his wooden sword, afraid that she would break his sword in a fit of anger. It hadn't even been a few days. Sister 8, since His Highness the Son of Saint is going with our master, he naturally has to bring someone with him. Yan Qing is his confidant. Isn't that normal? Moreover, Peach Blossom Cove was a dangerous place with all kinds of people. It would be more convenient to bring someone with him. That's right. Compared to our master who brought so many people, His Highness the Son of Saint brought only Yan Qing, which is already very little. Besides, I heard that Yan Qing is quite powerful. Maybe he can be of help at a critical moment. Wu Yao asked as he packed his luggage. By the way, little Hachi, didn't you challenge him before? How was it? It was fine if he didn't mention this. Little Hachi was instantly enraged when she heard this. Her beautiful eyes were burning with anger. That Yan Qing is not a man at all. Shi Fang, who was carefully putting away the vegetables he planted, finally raised his head and asked hesitantly, Sister 8. You tried? Chi. Little Hachi threw the broken hairpin in her hand out. The sound of something breaking through the air was heard. Shi Fang quickly dodged, picked up his vegetables, and ran away. Little Hachi let out a long breath and snorted. I didn't fight with him that day. Originally, she wanted to reason with him. Of course, her reasoning was basically to fight. However, when she saw Yan Qing, he refused to fight no matter what she said. From the beginning to the end, he had no intention of fighting with her. He didn't even bother to talk to her. In Yan Qing's eyes, little Hachi was just a willful girl. He had always been cold-hearted, so of course, he didn't want to argue with her. He also didn't want to waste his time. Unfortunately, in little Hachi's eyes, this was an open eye. Hence, this grudge was completely formed. Wu Ya wasn't of his. You are Master's person. If he hits you, what if you go back and complain to Master about it? In my opinion, this Yan Qing is rather smart. Women were Tu's eyes of the most. Little Mina squinted his eyes dangerously, then suddenly revealed an enchanting smile. Anyway, there are plenty of opportunities along the way. Do you think I'm afraid of him? Sunny pushed open the door. Let's go. Peach Blossom Cove was thousands of miles away from the Yuntian Tower. There were all kinds of people arriving here every day. There were destitute aristocratic young masters, and extremely vicious fugitives. There were beautiful girls, and also old people who had experienced the vicissitudes of life. Therefore, although the appearance of Chu Luiyue and the others attracted some people's attention, it was only for a short time. Everyone's first priority here was to enter Peach Blossom Cove and survive. Let's go. Rong Xiu raised his chin, held Chu Luiyue's hand, and walked forward. The group of people followed. The teleportation formation was not far from the light screen, so it did not take them too long to reach the light screen. Chu Luiyue exhaled softly. She did not expect to come here again in her lifetime. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from the Love Network. Chapter 1824. The light screen of Peach Blossom Dock was naturally formed and completely enveloped it. On the other side was the gate of the Divine Ruins world. No one was in charge of guarding this place. Standing close, one could see the ripples on the light screen. When the breeze blew, one could even smell the faint fragrance of peach blossoms in the air. This aura was simply too familiar. Chu Luiyue took a deep breath and exchanged glances with Rong Xiu. Then, they stepped in hand. The moment they entered, 13 couldn't help but exclaim in shock. What rich energy of heaven and earth! After saying that, perhaps because he realized that he was making a fuss over nothing, 13 immediately covered his mouth and a trace of embarrassment appeared on his face. Chu Luiyue glanced at him with a smile. You're right. The energy here is indeed shockingly rich. It wasn't inferior even to the Yuntian Tower. This was also the reason why so many people wanted to take this place for themselves at the very beginning. This Peach Blossom Dock was indeed a treasured place for cultivation. That is, if one ignored the turbulent space turbulence. It was precisely because of this that Peach Blossom Dock hadn't been truly taken over by any faction. In fact, no one had any plans for it anymore. This further proved how dangerous this place was. It could only be said that it was a pity. But this place is filled with danger. You must follow me and not be left behind. The few of them nodded. Chu Luiyue looked ahead. This was a very wide street. There were all kinds of shops on both sides of the street. Many people came and went on the street. It was very lively. A trace of surprise flashed past Chu Luiyue's eyes. This Peach Blossom Dock seemed to be a little different from before. When she came here in the past, the scene was far from being so peaceful. But now, what was going on? Chu Luiyue looked at Rong Xiu and saw the same suspicion in his eyes. However, the two of them didn't say anything and tacitly swallowed their doubts. "Tini, do you know where Sanson's shop is?" Chu Luiyue turned and asked. Tini shook his head. He didn't mention this before. Moreover, they didn't have time to tell Sanson that they were coming over this time. He probably didn't know yet. Chu Luiyue was a little troubled. That's a little troublesome. The Peach Blossom Cove was huge. It would take a lot of effort to find a single person. "Tini, why don't you and His Highness find a place to rest first? When we find him, we'll report to you." Chu Luiyue thought for a while. "All right, take Weiyao with you." She looked around her. "We'll wait in the medicine shop. Perhaps he could also find out more about this place." "Yes." Tini and Weiyao responded, quickly leaving. Chu Luiyue and his group turned around and entered the medicine store. After entering, Chu Luiyue realized that the shop was much bigger than they had expected. From the outside, this place was just a small storefront, unremarkable. But when he came in, he realized that there was something else here. It was just that this shop seemed to have been here for a long time. There were many medicinal herbs and some pills in the shelves in the room. "Sir, what would you like to see?" A servant quickly came up to them. Seeing that they were well-dressed and well-spoken, his attitude became even more attentive. Rong Xiao said, "We're new here." "We are new here, so we're just looking around." "Hey! Then please take your time and watch." Rong Xiao had an innate noble aura. The servant knew that he couldn't afford to offend him, so he waited obediently at the side. Chu Luiyue looked into the shelves and his eyes narrowed. "I couldn't tell that you have so many good things here," Chu Luiyue said. Hearing that, a proud smile appeared on the servant's face. "Of course. You don't know, but in the entire Peach Blossom Cove, no one can compare to us." His tone wasn't small. Chu Luiyue laughed. "Oh. The Peach Blossom Cove is so big. Your small shop is the best." Seeing that she didn't believe him, the servant quickly explained, "Madam, there's something you don't know. Our shop is from the past. The new shop is being renovated. We'll be moving in a few days. Moreover, we have more than one shop. We have several other shops in the Peach Blossom Cove." This made Chu Luiyue curious. When did the Peach Blossom Cove have such a medicinal herb shop? One must know that there were countless fights and killings in the Peach Blossom Cove every day. Therefore, the business of medicinal herbs and pills had always been very good. However, it was also because of this that the competition between the medicinal herb shops was very fierce. Some of the smaller shops had been squeezed out. Those who were able to stay were all capable. Even so, Chu Luiyue had never heard of the Peach Blossom Cove opening several medicinal herb shops. At least, when she came here in the past, there weren't any. When the servant heard her words, he smiled. "Madam, you must have been here in the Peach Blossom Cove before, but you haven't been here for a long time, right?" Chu Luiyue nodded. "That's right. Actually, this shop of ours was only opened in the past year or so. It's normal that you don't know about it." Chu Luiyue was even more surprised. Her eyes swept across the medicinal herbs and pills on the display, and her mind was spinning. Many of the medicinal herbs placed here were heavenly treasures that were extremely difficult to find outside. As for those medicinal pills, their grades were not low either. "Did you find all these on your own?" The servant smiled and said, "Yes. Our boss regularly delivers goods to a few shops every month, and they are all excellent items." Chu Luiyue nodded thoughtfully. "Your boss is quite impressive." Digression: I took the medicine at night, but I was very sleepy. I fell asleep a few times while sitting. I guess I really can't write anymore. I'll stop here for today. Sorry, everyone. I'll make up for what I owe in a few days after the update. Love you. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from LoveNet. Otherwise, it would attract more people to covet and fight for it, which wouldn't do them any good. In the past, the Peach Blossom Cove did not have any treasures, so most of the aristocratic families were not willing to come here. But if word of this got out, who knew what kind of people it would attract? At this moment, Axion walked in from outside the door. They were dressed in black robes with huge hoods covering almost half of their faces. Only their exceptionally pale cheeks, bright red lips, and sinister eyes could be seen. There was a strange pattern embroidered on the left side of their chests. Two long swords intersected, reflecting a blood moon. Their murderous intent was awe-inspiring, and there was an inexplicable strangeness to it. There were a total of 4 people, and they were all dressed in the same way. When the page boy in the shop saw the arrival of these people, a trace of fear flashed across his eyes. Then, he quickly put on a warm smile and hurried forward to welcome them. Why are you all so free today? Please forgive me for not welcoming you earlier. The man in the lead looked at him coldly. Of course, I'm here to retrieve something. The page boy revealed a troubled expression. Sir, there are still 3 days before the stipulated date. We're not ready yet. Why don't you wait for, swoosh? The man in the black robe did not say anything else. He directly drew the sword at his waist and stabbed it at the page boy's shoulder. The page boy was shocked and hurriedly dodged. However, he was still stabbed in the arm, and blood immediately flowed out. This is something that our master wants. We can't delay it. Now, are you ready? The man in the black robe's voice was cold. Several people behind him were also ready to take action. The page boy covered his wound tightly. His face was pale, but he still said, If you want to retrieve it now, it's okay. But, we lack the spirit-melting herb. You know, this herb has always been in short supply. Not only this shop, but also other drugstores in the Peach Blossom Dock City don't have it now. The man in the black robe raised his chin. Then, retrieve the rest first. As for the rest of the spirit-melting herb, let your boss send it to me in person 3 days later. The page boy's face was even paler. Yes. Yes. Then, he turned around and walked to the counter. He opened the door with his other uninjured arm, took out an interspatial ring, and then handed it over respectfully. Sir, they're all here. The man in the lead immediately stepped forward and took the interspatial ring. After checking it and confirming that there was only the spirit-melting herb inside, he put away the interspatial ring and gave the page boy a warning look. I'll let it go this time. If the same thing happens next month, be careful of your life. After that, they turned around and left. When they walked out of the door, the man in the lead deliberately glanced at Chu Luyue and others. Normally, we would only see these lords, but as for their master, we have never seen him before. Furthermore, we do not know his identity. He has never stepped out of the Black Sword sect. It was not certain whether it was inside or not. At this point, the servant realized that he had misspoken and covered his mouth nervously, as if he was afraid that the people from the Black Sword sect would suddenly return. Chu Luyue tilted his head and looked at Rongxiu. He smiled thoughtfully. I didn't expect that the Peach Blossom Dock would change so much in just a few years. The Black Sword sect was not simple. For many years, countless aristocratic families and clans had tried to take root here, but they all failed. However, this Black Sword sect, which had appeared out of nowhere, had actually become the local tyrant in the short span of a year or so. In this case, the entire Peach Blossom Dock is now theirs, isn't it? The manservant hesitated. That's not entirely true. After all, many people in the Peach Blossom Dock did not like the Black Sword sect's behavior. It was just that their resistance was a little weak. Chu Luiyue nodded knowingly. It was not that easy for the Black Sword sect to take over the Peach Blossom Dock. However, they had done what many aristocratic families and clans had failed to do. If they were given more time, no one could say for sure what the result would be. The manservant thought for a while and said, "Esteemed guests. Esteemed guests, I don't know why you've come to the Peach Blossom Cove, but if you don't have any urgent matters, please leave quickly. I saw that the people from the Black Sword sect seem to be hostile towards you. It is really dangerous here. If they did not meet the people from the Black Sword sect, it would be fine. Or if they were very ordinary and would not attract their attention, so it would be safer." However, those people were not blind. They could tell that they had a strong background. The people from the Black Sword sect would definitely find trouble with them. Chu Luiyue smiled. She knew that the manservant had good intentions. However, they had just arrived. How could they just leave like this, mistress? A voice brimming with excitement suddenly came from behind. Chu Luiyue raised her eyebrows. Her lips were already curled into a smile. She turned around and saw a chubby little fatty dressed in a gorgeous brocade robe running towards her at high speed. Although his body was round and smooth, his movements were very agile and nimble. In the blink of an eye, he was in front of them. Chu Luiyue could not help but smile. "Sansan, I haven't seen you for a long time. How come you have become chubbier?" When the chubby little boy heard this, he immediately rushed over excitedly. "Mistress! You are finally here. Sansan has missed you so much." Rongxiu glanced at him. Sansan suddenly felt a chill from the bottom of his heart. His strong desire to live made him stop in his tracks. He stopped 3 steps away from Chu Luiyue. In the blink of an eye, he was smiling so widely that his eyes were squinted. He eagerly said to Rongxiu, "Mistress, this must be your husband, His Highness the Holy Sun. He is truly a handsome man. He is a match made in heaven with you." Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from the Love Network. Chapter 1827. Any normal person could tell that he was trying to curry favor. But when these words came out of his mouth, they sounded especially sincere. He first bowed solemnly to the two of them before he straightened his body and said to Chu Luiyue in admiration, "Master, you're very talented. Master, I thought that there was no man in this world who was worthy of you. I didn't expect that I was so wrong." Rongxiu raised the corner of his mouth. This Sansan really lived up to his reputation. Although she knew his intentions, his tone was like a spring breeze. It seemed that she could feel his sincerity, which made people unconsciously convinced. He was indeed good at talking. No wonder he could do well in a place like Peach Blossom Dock. Hearing Sansan's words, Chu Luiyue's mouth twitched slightly. After not seeing him for a few years, his skills had really improved. She looked at Sansan up and down. "It seems that you've been living a good life here. Look, your chin is about to show." Sansan chuckled and narrowed his small eyes with a shrewd light. He looked fair and soft, very amiable and likable. He really hadn't seen Chu Luiyue for a long time and missed her very much. Now that he saw her and heard her familiar teasing, he only felt happy. "It's all because I know that Master and His Highness are going to get married. I'm so happy that I ate a few more bowls of rice." Chu Luiyue, it was the first time she heard someone talk about gluttony so confidently. Shifang nodded very seriously and said, "Master, third brother is not picky about food. Every time he is in a good mood, he can eat a few more bowls of rice every meal. Unlike him, he was too picky about food and often didn't have enough to eat." Sansan's eyelids twitched. He had always been coarse and thick-skinned. He basically didn't take what others said to heart. But every time he opened his mouth, he would be ruthlessly stabbed. Shifeng must be one of them. He looked at Shifeng with a faint gaze. Shifeng, there are many times when you don't have to speak. It was better to pretend to be mute than to say the wrong thing. Shifeng shrank his neck and felt that it was dangerous, so he obediently responded. Oh. Boss. The servant at the side was already stunned and called out to Sanson in a daze. You. His eyes moved back and forth between Chu Luiyue and Sanson. His own boss actually called this lady Master. Chu Luiyue and the others also realized that something was wrong. Her eyes widened slightly. Sanson, this shop is yours. Sanson nodded calmly. Yeah. So Sanson was the boss. Chu Luiyue came back to his senses and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She really didn't expect. Xiao Zhao, why aren't you greeting master? Chu Luiyue was his master, and he was the boss of these people. Naturally, Chu Luiyue was also the master of these people. The manservant hadn't recovered from the shock just now. Hearing this, he hurriedly responded. Ah. Oh. Yes. Greetings, master. As he spoke, he even wanted to kneel down and salute Chu Luiyue. Chu Luiyue raised his hand. You're injured. No need to be so polite. Only then did Sanson notice that Xiao Zhao's arm was wrapped in gauze, and a large patch of red had been wet on it. His face became serious. The people of Black Sword Sect are here again. The manservant nodded with a bitter face. Now in the Peach Blossom Dock, there was only one family who would dare to act so brazenly against them. They also said that you should come to them in person 3 days with the spirit melting grass. Sanson's face twitched. Chu Luiyue frowned and laughed angrily. So you're saying, just now, those people snatched my things right in front of me? Digression, in a cold and dead body, 6:00 in the evening. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1828. Sensing his master's murderous intent, Sanson trembled all over. Having served his master for so long, he knew that what she hated the most was other people snatching her things away. Now, it was happening right in front of her. Ahem, master, don't be so anxious. Calm down. I'll explain it to you in detail later. Sanson chuckled as he spoke. You've come all the way here. I'm sorry for not coming out to meet you. This place is too shabby. Why don't you and His Highness take a rest at my place? He had prepared the place long ago. After all his earnings were for his master. He just didn't expect that they would come so quickly. Chu Luiyue nodded. The situation at Peach Blossom Dock was more complicated than expected. They had to calm down and understand the situation before making a decision. Let's go to your place. After taking a few steps, she glanced at the servant beside her. He's injured. Let him rest at home for a few days. Sanson hurriedly said. Ah. Okay. He waved at the servant. Xiao Zhao, it's your fortune that master asked for it personally. You can go back and rest for the next few days. You'll be paid as usual. The servant was overjoyed and quickly thanked master. Sanson was nervous and happy at the same time. He led the way while rubbing his hands and asked expectantly. Master, you and His Highness have only been married for half a month. Why are you here so soon? Is it? He originally wanted to ask if his master also missed him in his heart. However, before he could finish his sentence, he saw Rong Xiu's cold smile from the corner of his eyes. Sanson swallowed her saliva with difficulty and tactfully swallowed the rest of her words. Ahem. Master, His Highness, this way please. After the group of people left, the servant stood at the door and looked at them for a long time. Regarding that master, the boss had mentioned it many times. He didn't expect that she was such a young lady. However, judging from her elegance and temperament, she was indeed not an ordinary person. The boss's master was indeed extraordinary. Thinking back to the scene of the people from the Black Sword sect coming here to ask for something, the servant felt a little uneasy. This master doesn't seem to be easy to deal with. I wonder if I'll end up in trouble with the Black Sword sect this time. Chu Luiyue and the others walked towards the city. Sanson followed beside him and kept nagging. Most of them were his experiences over the past few years, as well as some trivial matters that had happened recently. Chu Luiyue was already used to this, so he listened quietly. Yes. Sanson not only likes to write letters, but also likes to talk. However, Sanson knew when to say what to say and what not to say. Just like now, he knew that this was the first time that Chu Luiyue and Rongxiu had returned to Peach Blossom Dock after a few years. Therefore, he told Chu Luiyue about the changes in Peach Blossom Dock. Suddenly, he heard that he was just chatting, but in fact, the rules were clear, and the main points were very clear. Chu Luiyue listened and nodded from time to time. Previously, when they were in the shop, the servant also said a lot, but it was all intermittent. Now that they heard Sanson's explanation, they finally connected the series of events together. The few of them stood in front of the door and looked forward. The stone lion at the door was made of pure gold, and the steps were covered with a red velvet carpet. The servants in the mansion seemed to have gathered around and respectfully lined up on both sides. "Welcome back, Master." It was a grand and imposing sight. Looking up, the pure gold plaque above did indeed have the two words, "You Mansion," written on it. Chu Luiyue looked at this dazzling and ostentatious mansion, and the corner of his mouth twitched again. Why is Sanson always able to exaggerate beyond my imagination? How is it? Master, do you like it? Sanson smiled until his eyes narrowed into slits. Time is of the essence, and I didn't have time to rehearse. Please forgive me. Chu Luiyue, for a moment, she really had the urge to run away. Seeing Chu Luiyue's reaction, Sanson was a little unsure. Does Master not like it? But this was a mansion that he had specially spent a lot of effort to renovate. This welcoming ceremony was also carefully designed by him. This door is so grand. This welcome is so warm. Why doesn't Master like it? Sanson's eyes turned, and he moved closer to Rongxiu. Your Highness, what do you think? She silently glanced at Rongxiu. Where did this inexplicable feeling of embarrassment come from? His Highness, the Holy Sun, was as gentle as jade. Dressed in white, he looked like a banished immortal. Hearing this, he gently nodded, and his jade-like chin drew a perfect arc. Not bad. It seems that you're really concerned about your master. Sanson immediately beamed with joy. Your Highness is really amazing. It's good that you two like it, it's good that you like it. Chu Luiyue, Rongxiu looked sideways at her, and his thin lips curled into a smile that almost rippled to the corners of his eyes. It seems that 13th you treats you extremely well. Chu Luiyue, let's go in and take a look. As Rongxiu spoke, he had already pulled her hand and walked inside. Sanson followed him happily. Little Hachi glared fiercely at the two pure gold lions. Big brother, can I not go in? This place is so ugly. So ugly. Xin Yi's expression was indifferent. He straightened his clothes and followed directly. Sure. Sanson has a few other courtyards. You can go and take a look. Anyway, they were all of this standard. When little Hachi thought about how her eyes still had to be tortured a few more times, she suddenly felt that life was hopeless. If I really sleep in a place like this, my dress will be dull. As she spoke, she turned to leave. Stay at the inn, stay at the inn. Unexpectedly, as soon as she turned around, she saw a sturdy and muscular figure. She was caught off guard and directly bumped into him. Hey! Just as she was about to bump into the other party's arms, the figure in front of her suddenly stepped to the side and dodged. Dodged. Little Hachi's body fell uncontrollably to the ground. She widened her eyes. Is there something wrong with this person? If she fell to the ground like this, her reputation would be ruined. Just as she was thinking about how to fall more beautifully, a strong force suddenly came from the side. A broad and rough palm pulled her slender and smooth arm and pulled her back. With this force, little Hachi finally managed to stand firm. With this struggle, a string of broken jade beads on her wrists and ankles made a messy sound. She turned her head back in shock. Yan Qing had already let go of his hand. Little Hachi widened her big charming eyes. You! Why were you dodging just now? It was as if he was afraid that she would do something. Yan Qing frowned. After all, the other party was a girl. If they bumped into each other, it would be really inappropriate with so many people watching. Was it wrong for him to take the initiative to step aside? Besides, he didn't let her fall. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from AI Network. Chapter 1829. However, looking at the angry eyes of the woman in front of him, her willowy eyebrows were raised, and her originally rose-like face was flushed with excitement and anger. She was indeed a beauty of the world. Yan Qing pondered in his heart. She seemed to be really angry. Then. I won't dodge next time. Standing directly opposite her, he could help her up in time. Little Hachi was stunned for a moment. She immediately stared at Yan Qing to make sure that he was not joking. He was actually saying this seriously. She gasped in disbelief. How could there be such a man in this world? He was straight, wooden, and extremely stupid. Why did he say that as if she couldn't wait to pounce on him again? Yan Qing was confused. Why did she seem to be even angrier? Didn't he just say what she wanted? He knew that this girl seemed to have a lot of hostility towards him, so in order to avoid conflicts, he had been patient several times along the way. But every time, the other party didn't seem to appreciate it, and the conflict became more and more intense. Just you wait. Little Hachi turned around and left angrily. Her bright dress fluttered in the wind, like a light and enchanting butterfly, floating away. It was just that, she floated into the magnificent Yu mansion. Shi Fang opened his mouth and wanted to remind her, but his nose hurt faintly, so he gave up. Wu Yao coughed. Eighth sister is used to being straightforward. Lord Yan Qing, please don't mind her. Yan Qing shook his head. Although he didn't understand why the other party was angry, but, if he offended the other party, then he would give in. If he really couldn't, then he could avoid it. What was the point of arguing with a little girl? Stepping into the mansion, Chu Luiyue was not surprised to see that there were festive red silk everywhere. Those who didn't know better would think that there was a big celebration here. This time, even Rong Xiu's footsteps were stagnant for a moment. Chu Luiyue suffocated for a moment, and then waved his hand. Sansan, you're dressed too ostentatiously. Have you forgotten what I told you before? You should be humble and keep a low profile. Sansan readily accepted his advice. This time, he quickly understood what Chu Luiyue meant. He immediately nodded in agreement. Master is wise. You see, I'm so happy that I'm confused by your arrival. He patted his head and waved at the person beside him. Men. Quickly remove all of these. In the future, the entire Yu residence will follow the wishes of Master and His Highness. Everyone responded in unison. Yes. As soon as they finished speaking, they quickly took action. The efficiency was astonishing. Chu Luiyue exclaimed in surprise. She originally thought that these servants were ordinary people, but now she realized that their strength seemed to be not bad. Although he wasn't the best, his movements were agile and his steps were light. Chu Luiyue leaned back in his chair and fell into deep thought. Sanson valued money very much. It was already very difficult to get a single cent from him, let alone take away so many expensive herbs. It was basically a blatant bloodletting. Even under such circumstances, Sanson still tolerated it. It could be seen how domineering the other party was. If he hadn't been forced, she believed that Sanson wouldn't have agreed to do it. Rongxiu raised his eyebrows and asked casually. Since they are so interested in your pharmacy, why didn't they just take it? Why did they have to go through you? Wouldn't that be too troublesome? Digression, I'm running a fever. I'll try to write more. If I can't write more, I'll write in the title. Mobile users, please browse. A better reading experience comes from LoveNet. Chapter 1830. This was something that Chu Luiyue couldn't figure out. Looking at the way the Majin sect acted, it didn't seem like they would be kind. The truth was, although Sanson gave them a lot of valuable treasures every month and was bullied by them from time to time, Sanson was still living well. However, Sanson was indeed living well and earning a lot of money. This didn't make any sense. At the mention of this, Sanson's expression became a little strange. There was a rare conflicted look on his face, as if he didn't know how to start. This is a long story. He glanced outside, and after making sure that there were no outsiders, he said, Master, Your Highness, you know about Qingshui Cliff, right? Chu Luiyue nodded. That Zhao said that Qingshui Cliff had been split open by Tianlei, and that there was a small space inside where countless treasures grew. Sanson sighed. That's right. It's all because of Qingshui Cliff. When I first came here, I had been thinking about starting a small business, but I couldn't think of anything. Then one day, I was in a bad mood and wanted to go to Qingshui Cliff to relax. In the end, I ran into Tianlei. Fortunately, I reacted quickly and ran away in time, so Tianlei didn't hit me. However, Tianlei was tyrannical, and it stirred up the energy of heaven and earth around it. I couldn't get out at all, so I could only find a slightly safer place to hide. Tianlei exploded for most of the night, and it finally stopped when it was almost dawn. Originally, I wanted to leave as soon as possible after escaping with great difficulty. However, I inadvertently glanced and found that Qingshui Cliff had been split in half by Tianlei. There was a lake in the middle for some reason, and it was full of water. I was curious, and thought that since Tianlei had passed, there shouldn't be any danger, so I went over. Sanson rubbed his face as he said this. Sigh. Who knew that there really was another world in that place? I thought it was a lake, but it was actually a unique space where countless treasures were gathered. This was a windfall from the sky. He would usually pick up a copper coin when he saw it on the road, let alone when he saw such a scene. I was too excited and went over without thinking. However, as soon as I stretched out my hand, the barrier suddenly fluctuated and cut my palm. After that, I actually went in. Anne. Sanson sounded hesitant. Chu Luiyue understood something. Moreover, you became the master of that small space. Sanson scratched his head and answered in embarrassment. He looked up at Chu Luiyue. If I had known earlier, I would have left that small space for master no matter what. Chu Luiyue couldn't help but laugh. That's enough. This is your fortuitous encounter, and it should belong to you. What are you still hesitating for? How could she not know what kind of person Sanson was? He was probably overjoyed to have obtained such a small space by chance. Now that he said this, it was nothing more than a show of loyalty. Chu Luiyue knew his thoughts and methods like the back of his hand. He didn't even need to guess. Sanson laughed and rubbed his hands. Hee. Master knows me best. He did want to leave this thing for Master, but things like fortuitous encounters were hard to predict. Master, don't worry. Since this small space belongs to Sanson, it will naturally be yours in the future. Chu Luiyue touched his chin and smiled. That is to say, that small space is now completely under your control. Sanson shook his head. That's not entirely true. It's just that compared to others, I can go in and out at will, and I can bring a few people with me. Those medicinal herbs, I personally brought people to pick them every time. This was enough. That small space was equivalent to a treasure house, and Sanson was the only person who held the key. Sanson lowered his voice. Actually, I later found out that the stronger I am, the more people I can bring with me. His strength was limited now, and he could only bring a few people with him. But if his strength increased in the future, he might be able to bring hundreds of people with him. But the people of Majin sect don't know this. They only know that if I die, that small space will be sealed again, and even collapse. So they don't dare to do anything to me. This was Sanson's confidence. Chu Luiyue finally understood. No wonder, if that was the case, it was not hard to understand why the relationship between Sanson and Majin sect was so strange. The people of Majin sect used Sanson to obtain these heavenly treasures. And Sanson also used Majin sect's power to gain a foothold here. Chu Luiyue stared at him. Sanson, this is asking a tiger for its skin. Sanson coughed and showed an aggrieved expression. Master, I don't have a choice. As he spoke, he hurriedly looked at Sun. Help me say something. Sun had barely spoken since he came in. Seeing that Sanson was urgently asking for help, he slowly spoke. Although it's dangerous, it's a win-win situation. No matter what, it's better than being trampled on. In any case, Sanson still had a trump card in his hand, and it was this trump card that could save his life. Wu Yao, Big Brother is right. Big Brother is right. 13, Big Brother is right. Shifang, Big Brother is right. Master, third brother is now equivalent to a hen that can lay eggs. If the people of Majin sect had any brains, they wouldn't do something like killing the goose that lays the golden eggs. The corners of Sanson's mouth twitched violently, and he looked at Shifang with resentment. After they finished speaking, the room fell silent again. Chu Luiyue looked at little Hachi. At this moment, she was resting her chin on one hand and leaning against the chair listlessly, looking very listless. Chu Luiyue asked, Little Hachi, what do you think? Little Hachi didn't say anything. Little Hachi. Chu Luiyue called again. Little Hachi snapped out of her daze and looked up at Chu Luiyue. What? Ah, right, Big Brother is right. Chu Luiyue. What's wrong with you? You look like your soul has left your body. Little Hachi wanted to say something, but hesitated. In the end, her gaze fell on Sanson. Nothing, I was just shocked by third brother's beauty. Digression, have a meal and continue reading. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1831. Chu Luiyue looked at little Hachi thoughtfully. Did you quarrel with Yanqing again? Since when did I? Little Hachi immediately retorted and raised her voice. Chu Luiyue understood. Ah, they quarreled again. He didn't know why, but these two people always had conflicts when they were together. Little Hachi, on the other hand, was usually enchanting and charming. Other than the 13U sect, she basically spoke softly to men. Now that she was facing Yanqing, he didn't know what was wrong with her, but she was always very easily irritable. Logically speaking, Yanqing was such a big ice cube that could freeze people to death. If he didn't, he might keep going against little Hachi. He really didn't know how Yanqing had offended her. Chu Luiyue sipped his tea. Little Hachi, women who are often angry will age quickly. Little Hachi was dumbfounded and immediately touched her face. It's over, it's over. She had been angry for no reason recently. Could it be that she really had wrinkles? I'll go back and rest first. After leaving this sentence, little Hachi hurried out. What's a man? Beauty is more important. Chu Luiyue put down his teacup. It seemed that as time passed, some people's fatal weakness was still hit with one blow. How much do you know about the Ink Sword sect? Rong Xiao looked at Sansan. Have you seen the master they mentioned? Sansan's expression became much more serious, and she shook her head. The Ink Sword sect has a mansion here, but it's extremely strictly guarded. Even I have to go through many checks every time I go there. Moreover, their master is very mysterious. I haven't seen him even once after so long. Every time I meet up with him, it's the same middle-aged man, Mo Yun. Mo Yun is the vice sect leader of the Ink Sword sect. He has a very high position in the Ink Sword sect and is basically in charge of all the affairs of the Ink Sword sect. Mo Yun. Rong Xiao narrowed his eyes as a dark light flashed across his eyes. Did you think of something? Chu Luiyue asked. Rong Xiao paused and shook his head. It's just a guess, but nothing is certain yet. It wouldn't be too late to wait until he understood more about it. Chu Luiyue knew that he had never fought a battle that he had no confidence in. He would never make rash decisions about things that he still had doubts about, so he didn't continue to ask. What she wanted to know the most was why the Black Sword sect had spent so much effort on the Peach Blossom Cove. Take this place for himself. But even if there was a Qingshui cliff here, it wasn't theirs. What could they gain by wasting time here? Just for those medicinal herbs and pills? Not to that extent. For the abundant heaven and earth energy here. It wasn't worth it. In order to absorb more cultivators and expand his strength. Thinking of this, Chu Luiyue asked again. After the people from Black Sword sect came, did the number of people in the sect increase by a lot? Sansan thought for a moment and said, to be honest, not by a lot. Anyone who wants to enter the Black Sword sect has to go through a month of examination. Only those who passed the test would be able to stay. Those who failed would be eliminated. From what I know, the elimination rate is very shocking. But even so, there are still people who want to go. This was to be expected. After all, the Black Sword sect was the strongest faction in the Peach Blossom Cove. If one could become a member of the Black Sword sect, their safety would be guaranteed, and they would be able to stay in the Peach Blossom Cove. Those who came from outside the Divine Ruins world desperately wanted to enter the Black Sword sect. Those desperados who had come here for various reasons naturally wanted to seize this opportunity. Actually, not everyone wants to go to the Black Sword sect. Many of them even have grudges with them. But until now, there hasn't been a single faction that can go against the Black Sword sect. Sansan explained. This was also why he was still in contact with the Black Sword sect. It was because life was forcing him. Chu Luiyue fell into deep thought. After hearing Sansan's explanation, she had a rough understanding of the current situation in the Peach Blossom Cove, including the Black Sword sect. But the more she knew, the more she found this matter to be tricky. She originally wanted to come here to take a look at Sansan's situation and prepare to establish her own faction. But now, because of the small space at Qingshui Cliff, Sansan was being watched by the people of the Black Sword sect. Tsuni looked at Sansan calmly. Sansan, didn't you say that you've already chosen a few places for Master to choose? Oh. Right. I almost forgot about that. Sun Yi's words reminded Sanson. He quickly took out a few pieces of paper and handed them over. Master, the places listed here are the places I mentioned earlier. I've already written down their strengths and weaknesses. If there's anything you're not clear about, feel free to ask me. Chu Luiyue took the papers and looked through them carefully. These places were mostly places in the divine ruins world that were rich in heaven and earth energy. Some were ownerless, and some were. The ownerless places were more dangerous, and the ownerless places required more money to buy them from the aristocratic families. In short, each place had its own strengths and weaknesses. After Chu Luiyue finished looking through them, he handed them over to Rongxiu. Take a look. Rongxiu looked through them quickly and finished looking through them in a short while. He looked up at Chu Luiyue and smiled. Which one do you like? A moment of hesitation flashed across Chu Luiyue's face. Rongxiu's smile deepened. With a turn of his wrist, he returned the papers to Sanson. Sanson hurriedly caught it, and his eyes swept over the two of them. Master, Your Highness, which one do you like the most? There was a moment of silence. Rongxiu knocked on the table with his hand and smiled faintly. She doesn't like any of these. Sanson was shocked. She doesn't like any of them. These were all carefully selected by him. Why didn't the master like any of them? Chu Luiyue deliberated over her words. Sanson, in fact, it's not that you didn't choose a good place, but these are not suitable. If it's just a place to live, there's no problem. But if you want to use it for other things, it's not enough. She had her own plan. These places were obviously not enough to meet her requirements. But, with my current financial resources, I can only choose these. Sanson was embarrassed. Of course, he knew that these were not the best. But he really had no choice. Chu Luiyue smiled and comforted him. Don't worry, I don't mean to blame you. After all, this is a big deal. You have to think carefully. You can't rush it. Maybe there will be better ones later. Sanson had to nod. By the way, 3 days later, you will go to deliver the spirit melting grass in person. What are you going to do? Sanson looked even more embarrassed. The output of the spirit melting grass is very small. 3 days later, I'm afraid I can only give them half of what they need. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1832. This wasn't some ordinary herb that could be obtained just because they wanted it. Even if he went to pick it regularly, he had to have it first. If you can't meet their requirements, what will happen? Sanson shrugged. If I can't meet their requirements, then so be it. At most, they'll give me some punishment, but it won't be too excessive. After all, they still had to rely on him to bring people into Qingshui Cliff to retrieve those treasures. Chu Luiyue thought for a moment. I have some here. You can take them and use them first. Although Sanson said so, she still felt uneasy when she thought of how ruthless the people of Majin sect were. It would be good if Sanson could suffer a little. Sanson was stunned for a moment. He was both surprised and nervous. This is too inappropriate, Master. Don't worry, I'm just lending these to you. Put them on the account first. You can return them when you have them in the future. Chu Luiyue smiled and comforted him. In any case, Sanson had that small space now. What kind of herb couldn't he want? As long as he waited, he would be able to return the loan with interest. Sanson's expression fell. Oh. He knew that he would never be able to take advantage of his master. Chu Luiyue stood up. All right, let's stop here for today. Everyone has been busy for a while. Let's go back and rest first. If there's anything, we'll talk about it later. The Yu residents occupied a large area. After removing those fancy things, it instantly became much more elegant. There were pavilions, terraces, and richly ornamented rafters. It had a rather noble aura. According to Sanson, he had specially bought this place before. When he bought it, this residence was still rather well preserved. So he didn't make any big changes. He wanted to wait for Chu Luiyue to come over and renovate it according to her preferences. However, Chu Luiyue couldn't be bothered to spend the effort. He said, "It's pretty good," and decided to continue living like this. Sanson felt rather sad when he heard this. Our master used to be so noble. Everything he ate and wore was the best. Now, he's not even picky about these things. Tsinyi glanced at him indifferently. Master, you've experienced life and death, so you've already seen through these things. It might not be a bad thing. However, if I had known earlier that you had chosen those places, I wouldn't have urged my master to come here. In other words, he also despised it. Sanson was immediately embarrassed and thought about it. Big brother, don't worry. I'll work hard to earn money in the future. Let's strive to let master buy whatever she wants. Tsinyi nodded and then left swiftly. It was fine as long as he had this awareness. According to Sanson's ability, it might not be impossible. Just like that, the group of people stayed in the U residence. Their arrival did not cause any commotion in the Peach Blossom Cove. According to his talent, the soul-gazing tribulation of this stage would most likely cause quite a commotion. Although the courtyard was large, it could not withstand the bombardment of Tianlei. Chu Luiyue pondered for a moment. I'll go with you. She also wanted to see how much 13's talent and strength had improved. Tsinyi did not seem surprised by her decision and nodded lightly. Yes. The thing that Peach Blossom Cove did not lack the most was mountains. Chu Luiyue and Tsinyi brought 13 to a remote and quiet mountain. Rong Xiao and Yan Qing seemed to be discussing something, so they did not follow. Chu Luiyue looked around. She had not been here much. Although she and Rong Xiao had wandered around Peach Blossom Cove for a long time, Peach Blossom Cove was too big, and they could not go to every place. Therefore, this time, her feelings were very different. Master, big brother, I'll go now. Chu Luiyue smiled and nodded. Don't be nervous. We're all here. Her calm and gentle eyes made 13 feel much more at ease. His lips curled into a smile as he turned around and headed to the mountain peak. Chu Luiyue and Tsinyi floated in the air and stayed around the mountain. 13 landed lightly on the top of the mountain. The young man who was smoking was tall and slender, looking slightly frail. The mountain wind blew, lifting the corners of his clothes. He took a deep breath and sat down cross-legged. He closed his eyes and focused, beginning to absorb the energy of heaven and earth around him. Soon, the rich energy began to surge toward him. Dark clouds gathered in the sky. Faint sounds of wind and thunder could be heard. Chu Luiyue looked over. Behind the layers of clouds, silver heavenly lightning started to appear indistinctly. 13 also had a Tianjing Yuan meridian. She wondered how many Tianlei he could summon this time. The number of heavenly thunders attracted during the divine tribulation was, to a large extent, an indication of the level of strength a cultivator could reach in the future. Therefore, all cultivators paid special attention to this stage. They didn't have to wait for long. Boom! A bolt of heavenly lightning struck down. The energy around the mountain surged. Chu Luiyue waved her hand and set up a barrier in front of her, silently blocking the violent energy outside. The power of Tianlei was no longer a threat to her. 13's figure was shrouded by the dazzling white light, almost unable to be seen clearly. However, Chu Luiyue wasn't worried. Tsinyi, with 13's talent, how many Tianlei do you think he can summon? Sun-yi could be considered half a master to 13. He should be the most knowledgeable about this. Sun-yi pondered for a moment. Probably, boom. At this moment, a loud sound came from the other side of the sky. Chu Luiyue and Sun-yi both turned to look. They didn't know when, but that side had been covered by thick dark clouds. And looking at the situation, it seemed that Tianlei was about to fall. There's someone else cultivating here. Chu Luiyue was a little surprised. Wasn't this too much of a coincidence? It was still morning. Moreover, in order to let 13 focus on breaking through, they specially ran a long distance and made sure that this place was remote and quiet before choosing this place. They actually encountered someone like this. And they were also breaking through. Soon, Chu Luiyue discovered that the other party's formation was even grander than theirs. It seems that a cultivator of a high level is breaking through, Chu Luiyue murmured. Boom! Tianlei fell from the sky like a silver snake. It struck down fiercely. However, this Tianlei didn't fall on the peaks of the mountains below. Instead, it seemed to fall in the valleys of those mountains. Boom! Then, a second strike followed. Chu Luiyue was slightly surprised. The speed at which this Tianlei fell seemed to be a little abnormally fast. Sun-yi stared at the sky not far away and frowned slightly. Seeing his expression, Chu Luiyue asked, "Is there something wrong?" Sun-yi nodded and pointed in that direction. "Master, look carefully. The places where the two bolts of heavenly lightning fell are not the same." Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1834. Hearing his words, Chu Luiyue looked over again. This time, she found something fishy. You're right. Although the two Tianlei are both falling toward the canyon in the middle of the mountains, their exact locations are indeed different. Because they were not far away, and the two of them had amazing eyesight, they could see very clearly. At first glance, they would not notice anything wrong. But if they looked carefully, they could easily see the problem. However, the distance between the two Tianlei doesn't seem to be far. Chu Luiyue frowned. It's as if, boom. Before she could finish her sentence, the third bolt of lightning struck immediately after. Chu Luiyue pondered for a moment and laughed. How interesting, these three Tianlei seemed to be striking the same place, but the locations where they landed were different. If a normal cultivator was breaking through, or a refiner was triggering the Tianlei to refine a divine artifact, these Tianlei should have landed in the same place. How could they be so scattered? It was really strange. Don't worry about that side for now. Chu Luiyue retracted her gaze and looked at 13 again. At this moment, he had already survived the first Tianlei. The second Tianlei was surging in the clouds. Looking at his situation, he should be doing well. No matter what the situation was over there, she would not allow 13 to be disturbed. The distance between the two sides was really close. They were both triggering the Tianlei. Chu Luiyue only hoped that the people over there could do their own things peacefully. Soon, the second Tianlei of the Ascension Tribulation that belonged to 13 fell with a bang. This time, the power contained in the Tianlei was clearly much stronger than the first one. The edge of the mountain had already been charred black. Fortunately, 13's condition had always been good and he was as steady as a rock. Chu Luiyue felt a little more at ease. All these years, 13 had been following Sun-yi and the others. Although he could not officially become a disciple, he was not delayed. Sun-yi was extremely smart. He knew how to guide them, and that was the best way. This was also why although the 13 were together all year round, their interests and specialties were all different. Their personalities and so on were also different. Chu Luiyue was very confident in Xin Yi. Looking at 13's situation now, she was even more certain of this point. The movement over there seems to be expanding. Xin Yi suddenly said. Chu Luiyue looked sideways and frowned. In just a short while, a lot of Tianlei had gathered. At a rough glance, there were at least 4 or 5 streaks of lightning shuttling through the clouds like silver snakes. And almost without any hesitation, they struck down. Chu Luiyue stared at it for a while and felt even more confused. The reason for that was because the heavenly lightnings were still striking down in the same manner as before. She had almost never had she seen such a situation. However, what worried her the most was that the dark clouds over there were surging even more violently and had even begun to spread to the surroundings. If they continued to come this way, they would definitely affect 13. Just as Chu Luiyue was pondering how to solve this problem, a black figure suddenly flew out of the valley, rapidly heading in Chu Luiyue and Xin Yi's direction. Seeing the other party's clothes, Chu Luiyue's pupils shrank. Dressed in black robes, a huge hood nearly covering half of his face. Embroidered on the left side of his chest was a picture of 2 intersecting swords, reflecting the bloody moon. Ink sword sex people. Sensing the biting cold killing intent from the other party, Chu Luiyue's body instantly tensed up. This person did not come with good intentions. Xin Yi narrowed his eyes slightly, calmly clenching his fists in his sleeves. In the blink of an eye, the black-clothed person was already in front of them. Shua! He directly drew the saber at his waist. Who are you? How dare you trespass into Ink Sword Sex Mountain region? You really don't know the meaning of death. Chu Luiyue frowned. Ink Sword Sex Mountain region. This is Ink Sword Sex territory. Why didn't she know? This place could practically be considered a desolate mountain range. How did it mysteriously become their territory? If it really was theirs, why wasn't there even a barrier or a sign? On the way here just now, she didn't even see a single person in charge of guarding it. We've already been here for so long. If this really was your territory, you should have stopped us from the start, shouldn't you? Chu Luiyue countered with a question. The other party clearly didn't expect Chu Luiyue to be so gutsy. After hearing Ink Sword Sec's name, he still dared to refute so arrogantly. He was momentarily at a loss for words. This indeed wasn't their territory. It was just that he suddenly sensed someone here just now, so he came over to chase them away. His gaze became even more sinister, like a blade scraping past Chu Luiyue and Xin Yi. You too are newcomers. Anyone who had stayed in Peach Blossom Cove for a period of time wouldn't speak to him with such an attitude. Only those newcomers who didn't know anything would be so tactless. Chu Luiyue's gaze turned slightly cold. The other party's gaze and tone made her extremely unhappy. What? Newcomers don't have the right to stay here. Chu Luiyue's red lips curled into a cold arc. We'll mind our own business and live in harmony. Isn't that good? Why do you have to be so ruthless? As you can see, our child is in the midst of a breakthrough. At such a time, you must not disturb him. Whoever dared to interrupt 13's cultivation, she wouldn't let them off easily. Hearing her words, the aura of the black-robed man instantly turned sinister. The surrounding temperature seemed to drop by a few degrees, causing one to unconsciously feel a chill in their hearts. Chu Luiyue also began to circulate the force in her body. But then, his gaze landed on 13. Gazing at God's tribulation, he muttered in a low voice. Looks like your talent isn't bad. For some reason, his low voice made Chu Luiyue suddenly feel an intense uneasiness in her heart. That gaze of his, she frowned. Just as she was about to ask him to leave, that man suddenly pointed the tip of his sword at 13. There was a trace of excitement and bloodthirstiness in his sinister voice. Hand him over, and I'll let you off today. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1835. Chu Luiyue took a moment to understand what he was saying. At that moment, she almost laughed out loud. I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said just now. Could you please repeat it? The black-robed man glanced at her coldly and said word by word, I said, hand him over to my ink sword sect. This was not a question, nor was it a negotiation. It was an order. Chu Luiyue was still smiling, but her eyes were much colder. Interesting. It had only been 3 days since she came to the Peach Blossom Dock, but she had already met the Ink Sword sect twice. The first time, they snatched something from her. This time, they actually snatched someone from her. 13 is my man. He grew up with me. I'm afraid I can't agree to this request. Chu Luiyue said coldly. The black-robed man looked at her in surprise, as if he was shocked that she would say such a thing. Do you know how glorious it is to be able to enter my Ink Sword sect? Countless people in the Peach Blossom Dock have tried their best, but they couldn't enter my Ink Sword sect. Now that we have taken the initiative to ask for him, it is his and your supreme glory. Don't be muddle-headed. This warning sounded like a joke in Chu Luiyue's ears. They wanted 13, wasn't it because of 13's talent? Just a moment ago, he was still overbearing and filled with killing intent, looking as if he could not wait to execute them on the spot. However, after seeing 13, he changed the topic, saying something about handing 13 over to him. He even said that it was their great fortune to be able to enter the Black Sword sect. Bah! How shameless! Chu Luiyue hid her thoughts and smiled politely. I'm sorry, I still refuse. The atmosphere at the scene instantly froze. The air seemed to be frozen, and the coldness was bone-piercing. The black-robed man was so angry that he laughed. Are you sure? I've already said it twice. Didn't you hear me clearly? Chu Luiyue smiled, but there was a trace of impatience in her eyes. She hadn't settled the score of robbing her, and now he wanted to rob her again. This was too much. You. The black-robed man probably hadn't met someone with such an unyielding attitude in a long time, and someone who dared to talk to him like this. For a moment, he was so angry that he couldn't say a word. Rumble. Almost at the same time, the tianlei of both sides descended from the sky. Moreover, because the forces on both sides were growing larger and larger, the distance between the two large dark clouds was rapidly shrinking. Soon, the two forces would come into contact and entangle with each other. This was definitely not a good thing. Training, especially when summoning tianlei and preparing for a breakthrough, required absolute focus. At this time, any external influence could very likely lead to the failure of the breakthrough. This was what Chu Luiyue was worried about from the beginning. She raised her head to take a look, and her expression darkened. When the black-robed man saw this, he didn't seem worried at all. Instead, he sneered. How can the tianlei summoned by the divine tribulation be compared to the tianlei we summoned? If you really choose to fight us head-on, the only one who will suffer in the end will be you. Whether it was the number of tianlei or the tyrannical strength, 13's side couldn't be compared to the other side. If they really collided, it was tantamount to hitting a rock with an egg. The other side might not be affected much, but for 13, it was very likely that his breakthrough would fail. Hearing this, Chu Luiyue's mouth suddenly curved into a smile. Oh, is that so? Digression, not only did she have a cold and a fever, but her period was also kicking the door. She was completely useless. Continued at 6 p.m., I am Iron Man Wong February. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1836. She didn't want to get entangled with the other party. After all, she still didn't know what kind of background the Black Sword sect had. But if they went too far, then they couldn't blame her. I won't hand him over to you. As for Tianlei, third brother. At this moment, a rough man's voice suddenly sounded. Chu Liuyue's eyes narrowed as he saw another person flying out of the canyon. What are you dawdling over there for? Why aren't you back yet? That man didn't come over and only shouted from afar. From his tone, it seemed that he had a higher status than the man in front of Chu Liyue and the others. The man called third brother hurriedly explained, second brother, someone is breaking through here. He's summoning the divine tribulation, he's just a rank 6 warrior. Why hasn't he been dealt with after so long? The second brother seemed to be very dissatisfied with this. This third brother wanted to explain that he had wasted some time because he had taken a fancy to the young man who was about to break through and had good talent. Enough. We can't care so much now. Come back immediately. We don't have enough manpower here. What time was it now? How could he care about that? Third brother could only respond, yes. He raised his foot and was about to move when he turned around and gave Chu Liyue a deep look. Since you're not willing, wait to collect that kid's corpse later. When all of Tianlei was activated, how would there be any room for that kid to break through? At that time, only death would await him. That kid was indeed a good seedling. If he was handed over, he might be able to get a lot of rewards. What a pity. A trace of unwillingness and resentment flashed across third brother's eyes as he left in a flash. Not long after, his figure disappeared behind the mountains. Tianlei was still descending. However, his movements didn't hesitate at all. In fact, he was in a hurry. Those who didn't know would think that he was rushing to do some mission. Chu Liyue's heart lit up. Cini, did that man say that they don't have enough manpower? Cini nodded. That's right. This was even more strange. What was going on over there? What was going on over there? How could someone say that they didn't have enough manpower when facing so many people from Tianlei? Chu Liyue frowned and fell into deep thought. At this moment, the edges of the two dark clouds in the sky had begun to touch each other. The commotion caused by 13th side could not be compared to the other side. At a glance, it was only 1/10 of the other party's size. Under such circumstances, the power of Tianlei that 13 summoned would most likely be devoured by the other party. This was also why the man had warned Chu Liyue before he left. This was a battle without any suspense to begin with. Chu Liyue looked at 13. He was already undergoing the tempering of the 4th Tianlei. From the flickering light, one could vaguely see that his clothes were torn and stained with blood. Clearly, this was already a somewhat difficult process for him. If he were to be affected by external forces at this time, rumble. In the distance, Tianlei was descending on an even more terrifying scale. Thick dark clouds surged madly, covering the sky and the sun. The energy of heaven and earth gradually began to riot. Above 13's head, the 5th Tianlei in the clouds had already appeared, but it did not descend for a long time. Under the influence of that terrifying external force, the Tianlei was faintly showing signs of being absorbed. This could not continue. Chu Liyue made up his mind. When the other party's clouds covered and devoured 13's Tianlei, it would be too late. Cini took a step forward. Master, why don't it look after 13? Chu Liyue's expression was calm. His pitch-black eyes seemed to flash with a biting cold light. Whoosh! A snow-white longsword suddenly appeared in her hand. The next moment, she tapped the ground with the tip of her foot, and her slender figure instantly shot into the sky like an arrow leaving the bow. Her movements were light, her dress fluttering, and her long hair dancing with the wind. In this dark heaven and earth, she was like a blazing green bird, diving into the surging black clouds without hesitation. In the blink of an eye, she disappeared. Tsinyi frowned slightly, but soon relaxed. He did not move. A short silence. Immediately after, a sword light suddenly split open the thick layer of clouds. Scarlet Heaven Sword, break. Chu Liuyue's figure appeared once again. The clouds that had originally begun to merge were actually split apart by her. Then, the dark clouds, with her as the center, surged in two different directions. Sword energy overflowed and surged over. Tsinyi raised his head and looked at the red figure floating in the sky. He narrowed his eyes slightly. Her figure was slightly thin and frail. Behind her was the sky full of dark clouds, and in front of her was the boundless sword light. She had become the only color in this world. Tsinyi's tightly clenched hands slowly relaxed. A faint and long smile appeared in his usually calm eyes. Master, is still master after all. The commotion caused by Chu Liuyue's sword also attracted the attention of the people from Black Sword sect. What's going on over there? Second brother raised his eyes to take a look, his thick brows tightly knitted together. That woman actually split the clouds apart. When he saw the scene clearly, there was finally a trace of disbelief in his voice. Beside him, third brother, who had just returned, was also stunned. That's not right. This was different from what he had imagined. They had attracted so much attention from Tianlei. Logically speaking, the other party should not be able to fight them head-on. But now, that woman, where did that woman come from? Chapter 1837. The sword chi split the clouds in the sky into two. An invisible force surged out, blocking all the external forces that tried to stop it. Chu Liyue nimbly sheathed her sword and landed lightly. Tsinyi bowed slightly. Master, you're indeed extraordinary. Chu Liyue raised her eyebrows and glanced at him. I know that if you fight, you might not be inferior to me. In that case, there's no need to say anything more. Tsinyi insisted. What Tsinyi said is the truth. Chu Liyue smiled and couldn't be bothered with him. Tsinyi had followed her for many years and usually didn't talk much. It was rare for him to praise her like this, so Chu Liyue felt very pleased. She weighed the Scarlet Heaven Sword in her hand. As her strength continued to increase, she became more and more proficient in using the Scarlet Heaven Sword. She raised her head to take a look. In the sky, the sword chi she left behind had already formed a huge barrier. This should be enough to last for a while. Chu Liyue exhaled softly. This feeling of gradually becoming stronger, it was really satisfying. Finally, the fifth Tianlei, without the influence of other forces, fell with a loud bang. Ink Sword Sect. Sanson came out from the side door. Beside him was a middle-aged man. Sanson stood still, cupped his hands respectfully, and said with a smile. Deputy Sect Master, it's already my great honor that you came to send me off personally. Please stay. Mo Yun's figure was tall and sturdy. Just by standing there, he exuded an imposing aura. Hearing this, he laughed. Third boss, you're too polite. This old man knows that we've been in a hurry recently, and it's been quite difficult for you. Especially this spirit-melting grass, it's not something that can be obtained just because you want it. Third boss, please forgive my subordinates for offending you earlier. Sanson hurriedly said. I don't dare. I can be where I am today all because of Ink Sword Sect. Originally, it was my servants who didn't know the rules, so they made a scene. I didn't expect to alarm you. Mo Yun patted Sanson's shoulder and laughed. Third boss, don't worry. You're an important guest of Ink Sword Sect. How can they not be punished for hurting your men? As he spoke, he turned his head slightly. Men. Present the compensation to third boss. The servants who were following behind him at a distance hurriedly came forward and carried the wooden box that had been prepared earlier. Sanson glanced at it. In fact, he had noticed it since the beginning. He just didn't expect that this was actually an apology gift to him. Just as he was about to reject her, he felt the hand on his shoulder tighten. Third boss, this represents the sincerity and willingness of my Black Sword sect to continue working with you. You must definitely accept it. Sanson's round face trembled slightly. Then, it narrowed its eyes and smiled. It is my honor. Since that's the case, then this San won't refuse. After he finished speaking, he took the wooden box. Mo Yun was obviously very satisfied with his answer and withdrew his hand. Third boss is a straightforward person. It just so happens that there is something I need to discuss with you. Recently, the Black Sword sect has been recruiting a lot of disciples, so the consumption of medicinal herbs is extremely high. So, from next month onwards, the amount will be doubled. Third boss, is there any problem? Sanson's eyelids twitched fiercely. He knew that there must be a demon behind this abnormality. Mo Yun had always been extremely arrogant towards him. He wished that his eyes could grow on top of his head. When had he ever spoken to him in such a tone? Moreover, the Black Sword sect had hurt the people in his medicine shop several times in the past, but they had never expressed anything, let alone solemnly apologizing and making amends. So, they were waiting to ruthlessly rip him off. Double, how much money would that be? Sanson's heart was throbbing painfully and bleeding. He said somewhat awkwardly, Vice Sect Leader, it is my honor to contribute my meager strength to the Black Sword sect. But this double. I really can't afford it. Mo Yun's smile faded a little. Third boss, do you still feel embarrassed? Sanson choked and began to curse in his heart. It was more than embarrassed. It was simply too difficult. This time, just the spirit-melting grass, he had to borrow some from his master to gather all of it. In the future, it would be doubled. Where was he going to get it? But he naturally didn't dare to say these words. His smile became even more humble. Vice Sect Leader, please don't misunderstand. Sanson is really wholeheartedly loyal to you. It's just that twice is a little too much. Even if you empty out Sanson's fortune, I really don't have it. You see, if it's really so easy to take it out, there wouldn't be such a commotion 2 days ago, right? Mo Yun stared at him until Sanson was sweating all over. Only then did he let go of his mouth. Then, I'll add half of it. This should be fine, right? Sanson's heart was still bleeding, but he also knew that there was no room for negotiation. He could only smile and agree. All right. Don't worry, in the future, Sanson will definitely go through water and tread on fire without hesitation. Only then did Mo Yun's expression become better. After exhorting a few more words, he finally let Sanson leave. Sanson carried the wooden box and returned to the Yu mansion alone. Third brother, you're back. As soon as he entered the door, Yuchio came up to him. How is it, are you all right? After returning to his own place and seeing his own people, Sanson's hanging heart finally calmed down a lot. Yuchio, why are you here? Were you waiting for me? Yuchio nodded. Master and Big Brother went out and told me to wait for you here. Chapter 1838. Sanson immediately stood up, his expression changing a few times. Yuchio turned to look at him. Third brother, what's going on? Didn't they say that they wanted to apologize to you? What is this? Sanson stared at the heads with a serious expression. These should be the people who caused trouble in the medicine shop. I didn't expect that Mo Yun's apology would be their lives, Yuchio immediately remembered. So it's them. He was also there that day, but the people from Ink Sword sect were all wearing black robes and their faces were mostly covered by their wide hoods. He didn't take a closer look, so he didn't recognize them at first glance. Now that he looked again, it was indeed those people. Third brother, what's the meaning of this? Are they so ruthless to their own people? Yujiro frowned in disgust and closed the wooden box again. However, the air was still filled with the faint smell of blood and decay. Sansan sneered. Yujiro, you've just arrived, so you don't know what kind of people these people are. They can do anything to anyone, including themselves. These rotten fish and shrimps are nothing in Mo Yun's eyes. Mo Yun did this to give him an explanation for what happened that day, and to give him a warning. Of course, he knew that if he asked Sansan for more things, it would definitely arouse Sansan's dissatisfaction. That was why he sent this gift. The meaning was very clear: if you want to live well, then be obedient. Although they wouldn't kill Sansan now, it didn't mean that they wouldn't threaten him, or even hope to completely control him. In these 2 years, the people from Ink Sword sect had used many methods, explicitly hinting to him to join Ink Sword sect, but Sansan had evaded them all. Gradually, they stopped talking about this matter. However, this desire to control him clearly hadn't changed. Sansan walked over, and a ball of dark blue flames appeared in his palm. Boom! The wooden box, along with the heads inside, was quickly engulfed by the flames. In a short moment, it was burned to ashes. Yujiro looked at him in surprise and excitement. Third brother, you're good. When did you get such a skill? Sansan's talent was not bad, but it was only limited to martial artists. Only a celestial physician was capable of transforming the origin power into flames. At the mention of this, Sansan's face showed some joy, and he rubbed his meaty palms. This is naturally the opportunity of Qingshui Cliff. Back then, he discovered that he had formed some kind of subtle connection with that small space, allowing him to enter and exit it at will. Soon after, he discovered that there was an additional ball of fire in his body. With this fire, he also became a celestial physician. Although his level wasn't high, he more or less knew a thing or two about it. It was also because of this that he became more sensitive to those heavenly treasures and medicinal pills, which allowed his business to flourish. This was one of his trump cards. Yujiro praised. Looks like this Peach Blossom Valley is really a treasure trove for you, third brother. No wonder you're doing so well here. Sansan smiled. Then, she recalled what had happened a moment ago. A faint haze appeared between her brows. Unfortunately, as long as the Black Sword sect stands above me, my days won't be easy. Oh right, where did Master and Big Brother go? Yujiro put away the wooden sword in her hand and gave a rough location. Sansan was just about to sit down when he heard her words and jumped up. Where did you say? Yujiro looked up in surprise. I only said that they went in the southwest direction, but I don't know the exact location. Little 13 is about to break through, and it's time to trigger the soul-gazing tribulation. Master and the others were worried that it would cause too much of a commotion, so they said that they would go to a remote area to take a look. Oh no. Sansan's cold sweat broke out again with a schwa sound. He hurriedly ran outside. Yujiro pulled him back. Third brother, why are you in such a hurry? Is there something wrong over there? There's no time to explain. I'll go over and take a look first. We'll talk when I come back. Sansan hurriedly took 2 steps, then turned back and said to Yujiro, you don't have to follow. Just wait here. Yujiro hesitated for a moment, but still nodded. Be careful, third brother. Sansan waved his hand and left without looking back. How could he not be anxious? On this day of every month, he couldn't go over there. He actually forgot to tell Master about such an important matter. Damn it. Sanson felt guilty as he ran at full speed in the direction Yuchio said. Time always passed very slowly while waiting. Chu Luiyue and Cini stood in mid-air, waiting for 13 to pass the soul-gazing tribulation. He had already summoned the seventh one. Of course, he had also paid a huge price to endure this Tianlei. On the mountain peak, 13 half-knelt on the ground, his hands clasped tightly on the rough ground. His fingertips were already stained with blood. His thin body was trembling. It was obvious that he was enduring a great deal of pain. Chu Luiyue looked at the sky. Behind the clouds, the eighth Tianlei was faintly discernible. If 13 couldn't endure the seventh Tianlei, then the eighth Tianlei would naturally disappear. 13 had already spent too much time on this stage. Chu Luiyue was somewhat worried. Cini, can 13 make it? Cini nodded calmly. Of course. Chu Luiyue glanced at him in her usual nonchalant, calm, and indifferent manner. Are you so sure? Cini seemed to smile. Master, you should believe in 13's talent and potential to be chosen by Headmaster Nansu Huai. All these years of hard work weren't in vain. Hearing this, Chu Luiyue's heart calmed down. Cini had spent more time with 13, so he definitely knew him better. Since he was so sure, there shouldn't be a problem. However, as a bystander, she felt her heart ache as she watched from here. In her heart, she had always treated 13 as a child. Back when she was going through the soul-gazing tribulation, she had many trump cards. But 13 was going through it head-on. Suddenly, 13, who was kneeling on the ground, moved. He let out a low roar, mixed with countless complicated emotions. Pain, torture, perseverance, determination. When he stood up, the silver light surrounding him instantly shattered into countless specks of light. The seventh Tianlei, break. Chu Luiyue was overjoyed. Immediately after, the eighth Tianlei came crashing down. Boom! There was a loud sound. 13's figure was swallowed by the light again. Chu Luiyue frowned. This sound was too loud, no. This sound came from the large pile of dark clouds behind them. Chu Luiyue turned around and instantly widened her eyes in shock. There seemed to be a burst of energy in the dark clouds. At this moment, the black clouds and the silver Tianlei scattered in all directions. Affected by the powerful impact, a large portion of them actually flew directly towards them. Digression, there's still one more update, which will be a little late. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1839. What's going on? Chu Luiyue frowned as she looked over in bewilderment. Everything was fine before. Why did it suddenly explode? She had never encountered such a situation before, whether it was cultivation or weapon refinement. But she didn't have time to think about that now. There were at least a dozen Tianlei coming their way. If they were allowed to continue fighting, 13's side would probably. It wasn't easy for Chu Luiyue to wait until now. How could she allow her previous efforts to go to waste? The power boundary formed by the sword aura started to shake violently under the impact of this violent power. It wouldn't take long before it was broken through. Chu Luiyue gripped Scarlet Heaven's sword tightly. At this moment, several figures suddenly rushed out from the valley behind the mountain peak and fled in a sorry state. Chu Luiyue's gaze focused as she carefully looked at them. That bold three was among them. Their initial arrogance had completely disappeared and was replaced by endless panic and fear. There were also a few other people who were dressed like Black Sword sect members. They seemed to be injured, and one of them even had a broken arm. Was it because of the commotion just now? Just as this thought flashed through Chu Liuyue's mind, the Tianlei had already rushed in front of them. A green figure flashed past. Xin Yi waved his sleeve and a faint green boundary covered Chu Liuyue's sword aura boundary. With the two layers of barriers superimposed on each other, the power of the barrier was greatly increased, and the shaking barrier immediately stabilized. Chu Liuyue glanced at Xin Yi. After not seeing him for so long, his strength had indeed increased by quite a bit. Just from that move, it was enough to determine that Xin Yi's strength was definitely not below hers. This made Chu Liuyue's tense heart relax a little. Boom boom boom. The Tianlei came one after another and fiercely crashed into the boundary. The intense collision of energy produced a huge sound. The silver Tianlei power spread in all directions. It was especially eye-catching under the dark sky. This was the scene that Sanson saw when she arrived. When he saw the heavenly lightning that was crazily scattering in all directions, his small eyes widened in shock, and the flesh on his cheeks trembled. As expected, the people from the Black Sword sect were here. He hurriedly looked around, searching for Chu Liuyue and Xin Yi's figures. Although Tianlei's light was too dazzling, he couldn't see many things clearly. Fortunately, he was able to recognize the barrier that was faintly cyan in color. Seeing the familiar barrier, Sanson quickly rubbed her eyes. When he saw that Chu Liuyue was standing behind Xin Yi, sword in hand and hair fluttering in the wind, he let out a long sigh of relief. Luckily, Master and Big Brother seemed to be fine. Seeing that the Tianlei behind them were still crazily scurrying, Sanson shuddered, but he still gritted his teeth and charged towards Chu Liuyue and Xin Yi without hesitation. The violent energy wrapped around his body as if it wanted to tear him apart. From time to time, some Tianlei would attack him. Fortunately, although Sanson's figure was round, he was very agile and nimble. He passed by without any danger. Master! Big Brother! Sanson narrowly dodged the attack and ran to the two of them, asking anxiously, "Are you guys all right?" Xin Yi moved his fingers slightly. A crack was cut open in the barrier, and then, a strong force wrapped around Sanson's waist and pulled him over. Sanson's face twisted. "Big Brother! Can't you open a little more? It's uncomfortable for me to squeeze in here. It hurts." Xin Yi ignored him. With a thought, the barrier returned to its original state and continued to block the terrifying energy outside. "We're fine." "Sanson, why did you suddenly come?" Chu Liuyue asked curiously. "Didn't he go to deliver something to Ink Sword Sect today?" Sanson took a deep breath and explained, I heard that you, Big Brother, and Shirsan came here. I was afraid that... It's all my fault. I didn't tell you clearly earlier." Looking at Sanson's vexed expression, Chu Liuyue's heart skipped a beat. She raised her chin. "You knew that Ink Sword Sect's people were here." Sanson followed her line of sight. The few people who were running away pathetically just now had already disappeared. When Sanson came, he was only thinking about Chu Liuyue and the others. In addition, the sky was dark and there was violent energy everywhere, so he didn't pay attention to the situation over there, and didn't see those people. However, even if he didn't see them, he knew that they must be Ink Sword Sect's people. He scratched his head. It's a long story. I'll explain it to you when we get back. Fortunately, they've already left. If he stayed here and the two sides met, it wouldn't be good. How's Shirsan? Sanson turned his head to take a look. Chu Liuyue said. Right now, he's undergoing the tempering of the 8th Tianlei. He was almost messed up by them just now. Fortunately, he's fine. Sanson patted his chest. If something really happened to Shirsan, he would really die of guilt. Suddenly, a dazzling white light whizzed over from the side. Chu Luiyue looked over and saw that those Tianlei seemed to have made an agreement and were flying over together. She didn't know if it was because of Ink Sword Sect's people or because they saw that the Tianlei in front of them were easily blocked, but the remaining Tianlei sensed an unusual aura and flocked over. Crack! Finally, a crack appeared on the barrier. Chu Luiyue's eyes turned cold. She was only here to see Shirsan break through. She didn't expect that she would encounter wave after wave of trouble. There was really no end to it. Cini, move aside. Chu Luiyue took a step forward. Cini wanted to continue. Although the situation in front of him was a little troublesome, it wasn't fatal. But when he heard Chu Luiyue's voice, his expression changed slightly. Then, he respectfully retreated and gave up his position. Sanson looked at Chu Luiyue and nervously moved to Cini's side. Big brother, why do I feel a little cold? Cini glanced at him. Seeing that his lips were slightly pale from rushing over, Cini felt a rare sympathy for him. You should move back a little more. Ah. Sanson was taken aback, but its reaction was extremely fast. It immediately took a step back and took 2 steps back. Crack. The barrier was full of cracks. It was already on the verge of collapse. Chu Luiyue stared ahead, the aura on his body surging. The few bolts of lightning in front seemed to have sensed the danger. They immediately slowed down a lot and even showed signs of retreating. However, it was already too late. Chu Luiyue gripped Scarlet Heaven's sword tightly and raised it high. Then, he slashed it down. Scram! Boom! A terrifying pressure and sword aura surged out. In an instant, the clouds scattered and thousands of rays of light exploded in the sky. Digression, rest. Tomorrow at 12 noon, mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1840. The heavenly thunders, who had been preparing to charge over aggressively just a moment ago, all retreated in a panic. The ones at the front had already been destroyed by the sword energy. Looking at the flashing lights in the sky, Sanson subconsciously took 2 steps back. His hair stood on end. Master's power was terrifying. Terrifying. At this moment, 13's aura finally exploded. Chu Luiyue looked back. 13's aura flowed. Countless silver lights quickly disappeared under his skin. Then, he suddenly opened his eyes. A snow-white light flashed quickly from the bottom of his eyes. Sharp. Cold. Chu Luiyue's lips curved up slightly. 13 broke through. The dark clouds in the sky began to disperse. The surroundings were a mess. The mountain under 13's feet was charred black by the Tianlei. Chu Luiyue looked around and was secretly glad that he did not stay in the U residence to let 13 break through. Master! 13 clenched his fist excitedly. Then, he quickly ran to Chu Luiyue. The young man's handsome face was covered in blood. He looked quite miserable. However, his eyes were astonishingly bright and filled with unconcealable joy. Master! I broke through. Moreover, he could clearly feel that his strength had increased by leaps and bounds. This was a feeling that he had never felt before. After passing the god's tribulation, it was indeed different. Chu Luiyue was also very happy. 13 had passed 8 Tianlei. He was definitely one of the best. His future potential was limitless. Most importantly, he was only 15 years old. With such talent, it was no wonder that Master liked him. Good job. Chu Luiyue's lips curved up into a smile. There was no trace of the fierce aura that he had when he struck the Tianlei. Sanson sighed in his heart. 13 was probably the only one in the group who could enjoy such treatment. He coughed and said, Master, since 13 has successfully broken through, shall we go back? No hurry. Chu Luiyue shook her head and looked in the direction of the mountains. I still have some things to figure out. As she spoke, she gripped the scarlet heaven sword in her hand and was about to head there. Hey, Master, please wait. Sanson saw this and quickly went forward to stop her. Master, let's not go there. Chu Luiyue raised her eyebrows. Why? Sanson's expression difficult as he scratched his head. This, you know that place to go to the Black Sword sects ago? Chu Luiyue asked. That's not its ago. Hearing her words, Sanson knew that she had misunderstood and hurriedly explained. You also know that the Peach Blossom Cove is vast, and the mountain ranges are continuous. Although the people of the Black Sword sect have always wanted to take it for themselves, they haven't been able to stretch their hands that far yet. It's just that on this day every month, they will choose a place to conduct the final test for those cultivators who want to enter the sect. Although they choose a different place every time, it's not far from each other. Last month, they did it nearby, so I guessed that they should be here this time. When I heard from Yujio that you were here, I hurried over. I was afraid that you would bump into them. In the end, they still bumped into each other. And a conflict broke out between the two parties. Although they didn't fight directly, it was obvious that they had a grudge. Chu Luiyue frowned. Test. What kind of test would cause such a big commotion? Sanson's expression became mysterious. He lowered his voice. Master, you saw it with your own eyes. There's something wrong with the Black Sword sect's test. Actually, there are many people who know about it, but, since the Black Sword sect didn't mention it, no one dared to ask. I only heard that every time after the final assessment, those cultivators would suffer heavy casualties. Chu Luiyue sneered. Based on the situation in Tianlei just now, she knew how dangerous it was. How could an ordinary cultivator withstand it? Even the people from the Black Sword sect fled pathetically, what more others? Since that's the case, we have to go and take a look. Sanson wanted to say something, but stopped. Chu Luiyue smiled. Don't worry, they came to ask for Shirsan, but I rejected them. Even if we avoid them now, or even apologize, I'm afraid they won't accept it. What? Sanson was stunned. He glanced at Shirsan, and only then did he understand why his master was so angry at the Black Sword sect. This group of people actually targeted Shirsan, and even spoke rudely to you. Then there's no need to give in to them. Sanson thought of the few heads from before, and his stomach churned. I'll listen to Master. Since his master was here, he didn't have to endure it. With his master's current background, if they really went against each other, the one who would be at a disadvantage might not be him. Chu Luiyue's figure moved, and she flew forward. The people behind him quickly followed. The test location chosen by the Black Sword sect was not far from them. Not long after, they arrived in front of the mountains. Looking down, they saw a long canyon. When he saw the situation below, Chu Luiyue's pupils contracted. Tsinyi narrowed his eyes slightly. Shirsan sucked in a breath of cold air. In the canyon, several corpses were strewn all over, blood flowing everywhere. Other than that, there were traces of Tianlei's bombardment everywhere. And because of the terrifying power of Tianlei, almost none of the corpses were intact. It was a ghastly sight, comparable to hell on earth. Even though they had all seen their fair share of bloody and cruel scenes, when they saw this scene, they were still so shocked that they couldn't speak for quite a while. Sanson was the only one who was relatively calm. Although this was his first time seeing this scene, he had some understanding of the Black Sword sect, so before he came, he had already guessed most of the situation. These people are all those cultivators who are supposed to be taking part in the test? Chu Luiyue asked. Sansa nodded. They should be. There was a rare solemn look on his face. The Black Sword sect has always announced to the public that most of the people they eliminated have left the Peach Blossom Cove. But now, it seems, all of them died in their hands. Shan couldn't help but ask. This isn't the first time they've done this. With such a huge commotion, didn't anyone notice that something was wrong? Sansa smiled bitterly. That's right. There's no such thing as an airtight wall in the world. Indeed, there were quite a few people who secretly had their suspicions. However, even so, they were unable to stop the footsteps of those who wanted to enter the Black Sword sect. The majority of them had no way of turning back. Since the Black Sword sect is their only hope, they will naturally choose to take a gamble. For many people, if they couldn't become strong, it would be more painful than death. Sun suddenly looked ahead and said warily, "Someone's coming." Before he finished speaking, a light flashed in his hand, and a huge transparent cover covered their figures. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from LoveNet. You're tuning into the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.